Prof, thank you so much for joining.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you.
Awesome. You're based out of Atlanta. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in the south side of Atlanta. I'm right near the airport.
Okay. So very convenient where, whether somebody lives in the area or somebody just wants to fly in and get tattooed at your shop. It's right by the
Yeah.
airport.
Absolutely. And I didn't pick this location because of that, but I do like this part of town. And I don't really have a lot of out of town clients. It makes the work a little bit harder, being that it's such a focus on the large scale and the whole body experience. But it is something that I'm open to, but it has to be for the right collector who's understands that kind of commitment that's involved with that kind of endeavor.
Yeah, 100%. Cool. Well, actually, before we start, I just wanted to comment on your background there. I know we were looking at your studio and I see a lot of great artwork in the background. I don't know if, did you collect that over the years or any story behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have what I have up now is actually going to get swapped out pretty soon. I literally have about 10 new pieces that I've collected over the last year and a half or so, and I've just been kind of waiting to have a pile of things to bring to the framers. And so I'm constantly always looking to kind of enhance my environment. And what you don't see in this shot is that I also have a whole wall plus some of just examples of Horimono. Not my work, just works that inspire me, things that I like my clients to become engulfed in when they come into this space. A little bit of a snapshot for people to experience Horimono before our times, because most of our clients are my age or younger. And I mean, really, like, there's no way for easy way for my clients to experience these images and these amazing works that I have around because they're in books that are way out of people's budgets most times. And so I thought it would be a really good experience to not only have them from books, but also I've collected original well, I've collected replicas of people's original images. So other collectors I've come across, I've befriended and gotten copies of their original images, things you won't find in the books. And I've made that a point to have it in my studio as well. So I love Ozuma Kaname. All the banners you see in the top here are all old replica Ozuma Kaname pieces. His work was kind of limited to books and minimal prints. I've got one original print from him, but it's pretty hard to come by. They're pretty expensive and they're just not out there like that. But these banners, they were like Chinatown specials. Like you would go into tourist places back in the day and they would be there for $6 and they'd be in a little roll like a movie poster. And you can buy these tattooed women and they were beautiful. And I mean, even before I even knew who he was, I knew of these things because I would go into these shops and see these things. Some of my early kind of influences, even though it might have just been fleeting and in passing.
That's awesome, man. That's very humble of you. I think it speaks a lot about you, that you display other people's work just because it inspires you and it's motivating for the clients and stuff like that. That's very cool. Very cool
I
to
mean,
hear.
I find that my motivation is their motivation. Like when I'm passionate about something, there's a really good chance that they're gonna also relate because the things that I'm passionate about are amazing. The things that I'm inspired by are I find to be really incredible. And when I experience them for the first time, I remember that. And when I allow my clients to experience these things for the first time, I hope that that like resonates with them the same way.
Cool, cool, awesome, man. Well, why don't we get started with peppering you with questions, and we can start from the beginning. If you can tell us about your background and how you got involved with Horimono.
Sure. Well, I'm just a kid from Boston, and when I was growing up, we didn't really have a lot of tattooing around. It wasn't really part of our culture, I guess. It wasn't something that was around. Not only is it wasn't not huge the way it is in the last 20 years in the 80s and 90s anywhere in America, but in Boston, like New York and other places, it was illegal. So we didn't legalize it until I was out of high school. So it really wasn't a thing from my early experiences. I didn't see tattoos around town that were like I didn't see anyone walking by with something that was amazing. It was just kind of just kitchen magician, tattoo party kind of stuff. And that's really where tattooing lived in Boston prior to with maybe some exceptions that I just was not familiar with. But early on, it was I was always trying to see examples of tattoos. I'd pick up magazines and I'd be like awed by these, tattoo art magazines or whatever it was. But when I would be around my friends and their family members and school and wherever I was, I just wasn't seeing any of that. It was just, you know, people that were a little older than us had tattoos and they were terrible. I mean, a lot of them were scarred, a lot of them were raised off the skin, a lot of them were just done in a party where those kind of settings were like really popular, where you just have, you'd commit to 10 people for this artist and he'd show up and hope you had 20 because he was only going to spend 15 minutes with each person and probably not doing things incredibly hygienic and just a terrible experience. And I went to a bunch of those parties and I just never really felt compelled to have tattoos of that kind. And luckily, and I feel blessed to have like that foresight and be like, nah, this ain't for me. But also I would design my friends' tattoos at those parties. I'd be the guy sitting in the corner with a pencil trying to like do some lettering, because I came up with like a graffiti background. So it was easy for me to just come through and do some script, do some lettering. People would love it. And my friends would throw me 10, $20 and then they go get the artist to tattoo it. And half the time the artist would fuck it up, because they're hand tracing a stencil on thermal paper, slapping it on the skin. They got one shot to get it right. You want to move it, forget it. It was that kind of thing. And then half the time a line would go where it wasn't supposed to go. They're probably on drugs. It was just bad. So my early experiences were pretty bad, and I didn't really have good examples or role models for tattooing at that time. But my earliest experiences happened after it was legalized. 2001, I got just some off the street walk-ins. I had some designs that I was like, I want to get this tattooed on me because I still didn't really trust tattooers. It took me a long time to really grow into the mindset of being able to trust somebody to do something that on me that was permanent that I didn't have complete control over as an artist, and as an artist that came up around people who weren't artists that were tattooing, or maybe they were, but they definitely weren't showing it. And with that, I didn't really like have that mindset of like I'm going to go to an artist for what they do. So I was just going to people like, hey, I want to get this. How much? $200. Cool. Got a couple tattoos in Boston. I'll circle back to that in a minute because it is relevant to who tattooed me in Boston. But later on, my second artist I went to, I was seeking out someone in New York because I don't know, I was definitely lost with the whole idea of getting tattooed. I just was like, I want to get something good, but I was still in this mindset of like, I'm gonna design it. So I went to an artist in New York. I found his portfolio on a website. We're talking 2002. There wasn't a lot of websites. There was no social media. At least tattoo shops didn't have websites. It was pretty uncommon. So I found this shop in New York, um, and I found this artist named Marco Serio. And Marco stood out to me. And I don't necessarily exactly remember the thing that stood out to me, but I remember being impressed. And I remember looking through his portfolio and being like, this guy's got it. This guy's good. Everything looks like he has full intention and investment in the art. Everything looks clean. Everything looks well done. Nothing looks sloppy. I don't see any scars. Such a common theme for tattoos in my childhood. But um, I made an appointment over the phone. I showed up, met Marco, got tattooed. Wasn't anything like that he was going to put in his portfolio for sure. I just brought him like a family crest kind of thing, and he did it, and he knocked it out the park, and it was great. And then I knew I just wasn't going to try to get tattooed in Boston. So the thing about that's interesting is that, like, had I been getting tattooed in Boston, the scene was really growing exponentially. And later on in my career, I found out that there were so many heavy hitters in Boston. There was like Juan Puente and like really influential artists that I would have been lucky to get tattooed by that were in Boston. I just didn't know. There was no social media. If I didn't know somebody getting tattooed by them, I wouldn't even know they existed. And I definitely wasn't shop hopping and looking around and looking through portfolios because I had found Marco and I was like, I'm just gonna take the Fenghua bus. It's a Chinese bus from Chinatown, Boston to Chinatown, New York. And it was like $15, like I think 24 round trip or something like that. And it ran like 20 times a day. And that was exactly what I did. I would take the bus out there, get tattooed, hop on the back on the bus with a fresh tattoo and go home. And it was a great experience though. Like I it really opened my eyes to like the professionalism of tattooing, and also he opened my eyes to the possibility of tattooing because not I mean bringing him art and it's not perfect. He's making changes to it, like slight things, but and then one time I brought him some lettering and I was off my game. I didn't even try to draw it. I had a computer font. It was dumb. He was like, let me redraw this for you. If you don't like it, I'll still do this thing, but let me redraw it for you. And he drew some like phenomenal lettering that was like super artistic and it had a lot of flair to it and a lot of finesse. And he did some like maybe tight three or single needle stuff for like drop shot. It blew my mind and it wasn't something I could have thought of. And that was my first moment being like, I'm not in control of this and I'm okay with it because it's great. You know, this tattoo came out great. So it really opened my eyes. And then he also saw my potential. As I'm getting tattooed, we're talking. I'm telling him, yeah, I do murals and all that. I wasn't too open with talking to people about doing graffiti because because of the nature of it. But I think I showed him some mural work I did, some like legal murals, maybe some stuff inside people's houses. I used to get paid to do like, I did like a Scarface scene on somebody's wall with like black, gray, and white spray paint, and it was like realistic looking. And like I did stuff like that. People would be like, "Hey, I got $200, and I'll buy the paint. Come on." And I would do stuff like that back then. And I showed him some of the stuff, and he was like, "Man, you ever thought about tattooing?" I'm like, of course I thought about it, but also I kind of had this inherent fear of fucking people up, just because I saw so many people get fucked up, and I was just like, "Nah, I don't know if I could do that." And he was like, "Yeah, man, well, if you ever think about it, I'll introduce you to some people if you can like move to New York." And I was just like, "Damn, that's a big thing." Like at the time I wasn't in a position to leave Boston 2000, it might have been 2003 or 4 at the latest. And fast forward a few years, I hadn't got tattooed by him or anyone in a while, and I was kind of like not really loving Boston. It was getting to be a pretty crazy place, a lot of violence going on, and it's not like that now, but so when I go home, I feel like a tourist, but back then it was a little crazy. I lost a couple friends in a short period of time, and I was just like, you know what? I'm working like bullshit jobs. I'm not really making anything of myself. I went to school for graphic design. I was doing graphic design on the side, but it didn't feel like I could turn it into a career. And I was just doing like mixtape covers for like local rappers and doing photography and I didn't really at that time think I could even make that into a career. So I ended up moving to Atlanta. I had a buddy I knew from some art classes we took together who was also a graffiti guy, and he was out here in Atlanta and he was like, "Yo, I'm doing a music thing. We need a graphic design artist. We're making a small label and I got a room for you." I was like, "Okay, you got all the ingredients I need. There's a little bit of work, not enough to support me, but a little bit of work is guaranteed, and then I'll figure out the rest. I got enough clients." I had a job at the time that promised me they would let me, transfer to their offices in Atlanta, and then when I got here, it was like, the okey doke. They just would switched everything up on me, and hourly rates were ridiculous. Like it was just maybe like a third or half of the pay that I was making in Boston. And I mean, I didn't really understand at that point that like Atlanta was half of the price of Boston to live. But I just knew it wasn't going to work. So ended up doing random security jobs and kind of trying to find an apprenticeship. The whole time I had this thing in the back of my head that Marco had said just about apprenticeship, and I had never even heard those words in relation to tattooing prior to that. And same time, I'm following Marco and I'm following another artist that was working with him at the time, Regino Gonzalez, RG. And I'm following these guys and I'm seeing Regino like, and again, this is no social media. So I'm seeing this through like websites, like it was like portfolio websites. I think Regino had his own website and Marco might have too, but they both went over to Invisible shortly after, maybe a year after last time I got tattooed by him. And Invisible turned into what you probably know it became, this home of amazing tattooing in New York. And luckily later on I got to visit in its last days before they closed it, and that was pretty great. And it's also the last time I saw RG since that time in the early 2000s. So, I had, so I had that foundation of not really having a lot of good experiences to meeting Marco, and then moving to Atlanta, and I still had this thing in my head about apprenticing. In my mind, the easiest thing for me to do would be the easiest thing that I always did, which is realism. Lettering and realism was just always, it was just inherent. Like I could just sit down and just come up with letters and and draw an image that's in front of me, still life, or a model or a picture or anything. I could just reproduce it. It was not that challenging to me, but felt good to be good at it. Um, and I did. I finally found an apprenticeship, and it was with an artist that was doing realism, and so I got my chops doing that, and I went through 2 apprenticeships, and that was a really long process. Took me about 3 years to start tattooing. From I moved in 2007, got my first apprenticeship 2012, worked a bunch of bullshit jobs in between and did graphic design and all that. And then, after I'm tattooing, maybe about 4 years in, that's when I not only was my book collection growing and my interest in Japanese growing and being introduced by some of my mentors, to books that were fundamental in me really, just being falling in love with the imagery, but also I was collecting these ukiyo-e books that were all the woodblock prints of, you probably have seen them before, they're like master series, and I collected every single one of them that was out there. This is even before Amazon and all that. So there you had to kinda like, I don't know, there was other bookshops, I can't remember. Maybe it was Amazon, but pre-Bezos Amazon. And I would just order every single one I could find because these woodblock prints were just blowing my mind, and I was painting stuff, and it was based on, Chinese gongbi. I found some reference books with gongbi paintings, and I thought they were amazing, and, it was a lot of the same subject matter. It was cranes and koi and lotuses and all types of flowers and insects, and I was just painting all that stuff, and I was just fascinated with it. And it led to me looking at more woodblock prints, and then naturally looking at the stuff that the woodblock prints inspired, which is, Japanese style tattooing, Wabori, and just the Western equivalent. So I got Horishi 3 books and became a lot more, um I took a deeper dive into all that in those years where I was doing a lot of black and gray, and my work didn't reflect it. My paintings were completely different than my work. I didn't really have a passion for art other than tattooing, and I didn't really have a passion for painting anything that looked like the things I was tattooing at that time. I mean, that was work, and this is my art, like, because I really took pride in the outcome of the tattoos I was doing, but I didn't have a lot invested emotionally into the work, into the actual images, into the creative process behind it. So I found myself, over the years, it's probably about 4 or 5 years of doing that, and also walk-ins, and everything that came at me was getting done. It wasn't like I was like, "I'm only doing this." That didn't really exist yet in tattooing for most people, unless you were just an all-time great at the thing by that point. But the specialty part of tattooing came later, and, I think I was kind of, like, evolving around that time where I was building up clientele that was supporting me doing black and gray, and I felt like I can carry that anywhere I go. But at the same time, I was like, I have to I have to, get in a place that this exists already. I need to be in a space where Japanese tattooing already exists and where it's living, rather than trying to bring it to an environment where it's not. And I still think that's really important, but it's almost like, at that point, it was almost like I manifested it. Um, I'm out of the country, and I'm on vacation, and I get a message from an artist named Joe Vegas. And for anyone who doesn't know, Joe Vegas is a very, influential, important artist, in my opinion, in Japanese tattooing, and also somebody that has a huge foundation in tattooing, just has been from LA to other places and worked with some really great artists and done some really great art himself. And that was a huge thing to get that message where he's like, "Hey, I need a black and gray guy on my team over here. I got an empty booth in my shop." And I'm like, I'd be a fool to say no to this. This is but I don't want to do black and gray. So I told him when I get back in the country, I'll come talk to you and we'll see. And I came to the shop. I met with him. He's like, I really like what you're doing. All the portraits look amazing. Your work looks great. And I'm like, I'd love to come fill that role for you in the shop, but I want you to know that if I come here, I want to evolve into doing Japanese. I don't want to stay doing black and gray all the time. And he was, I mean, I thought I was gonna like get the boot, but he was he embraced me. He was like, cool, come on. And from day one, it was like open door for everything. Like I had books at my disposal I didn't have before. My early experiences with the Horiyoshi's World books about Horiyoshi 2, those were that was my first kind of experience, like being able to like really absorb those. I spent all my time in that shop when I wasn't tattooing and after hours just looking through books and kind of mapping out what I need to buy for myself because I never took for granted that the books were there for me. I understood that I should have them as well. And I invested nearly everything I had into books at that point, and on top of the collection I already had of woodblock prints and everything else. And then my work started to bud into what it became, and, if it wasn't for that opportunity, I think my growth would probably not be in the same direction or at least would have taken me another 10 years. So I'm incredibly grateful for that opportunity to have, worked with Joe, and I worked with him for 4 years. Um, when COVID came around, things changed a little bit in terms of how easy it was to get tattooed in shops. It was a little harder. Clients were a little iffy. I experienced a lot of that stuff, and this is at no fault of the shop or Joe at all, but um, I was also immersing myself into all aspects of Japanese tattoos, including the idea of private work being part of the true Japanese experience. And maybe not by choice, like a lot of those artists probably would have loved to have a storefront or even a public studio or something like that. I'm sure given the chance, if you went back that probably would have been more of a thing, but being that it wasn't done traditionally in those kind of spaces really resonated with me and it made me wonder what the advantages of being in those spaces would be, and it led me to open my own studio and go private. But with the growth that I had in those 4 years being so exponential, I went from doing 100% of everything else, black and gray lettering and everything else, being booked out, a few months at a time usually. And and then within the first year of being with Joe at Thunderbolt, it was a transition, maybe about 30% Japanese came my way. And those are the best days of my week when I got a sleeve coming in. Oh, I got someone that wants a one shot. I didn't care. It wasn't about format at that point. It was just about the content and being able to do things. So someone wants a one shot peony, bring it. Somebody wants this, somebody wants that. Let's do it. I was happy. I was excited to do that stuff. And I thought it would be, I thought it would be, a travesty if I didn't fully chase that. And like that feeling, like when you find that in your work, it's something that really, that's what leads to people becoming great. And I think I'm still on that path. And still feel that way about my work now. When I come into work every day, I'm like, who am I working on? Oh yeah, this is going to be good. We're almost done with the background. Or, those milestones I'm really looking forward to every single milestone with all the projects I have. But, going private really was part of this whole, like, attempt to kind of tap into some magic that happens in Japanese tattooing that I wanted to experience with myself and my clients, and since going private, a lot of my clients have really um, expressed to me that the space I've created, not just being private, because it's not the same. If you have a private studio and you got, whatever around, and I don't think you're gonna have the same experience. But I really have cultivated like a dojo that is a place for not only me to have the room to do such large works and the equipment to do it in a way that doesn't really like deteriorate me, but also like I have a hydraulic table and I have a lot of room and a private bathroom, and it's a situation that's set up for comfort, and that's something that I thought was really important because you'd hear these stories about Horishi sitting down with their clients and having tea, and their wife bringing tea and having a little like chat and a cigarette or something before they get to work, and then going to work and having a experience that's almost like a bond, a family bond, that kind of thing. And I always wondered, like, does it feel less like business when you're outside of a business? And that was what led me to where I am today.
That's awesome, man. No, that's a lot to process, but in no particular order, the things that are coming to my mind is you manifested it, and it's so good that I can sense your passion for it as you were talking, and as I heard your story, right in Boston, you're seeing all this shit, and that was shit, right? And you're like, no, I'm better than that, and then you aspire to be better and do your own thing, and then now you got your own studio, and you always knew what you were about, right? Even if you hadn't figured it out, you knew, hey, I don't want this. I want something better, and now we're seeing at your own studio. We can see it, right? It's behind you. It looks huge. I haven't been there, but it looks huge. It looks great. I see a lot of great artwork, like we were talking about earlier. So
Yeah.
that's
Well,
awesome, man.
if you're ever in Atlanta, you're welcome to visit. I'd love to have you. And also, I do think that that manifestation aspect of it is real, because I always felt drawn in, and I didn't really know it, but like all of these experiences. Oh, something I said I was going to circle back to. This is important because I ended up getting tattooed by Marco. Me and you both know Marco's amazing. He does phenomenal work, very inspiring. And the stuff he was doing back then was the same to me at that point in my growth. He might look back on his old stuff and be like, yeesh, we all do. That's what artists do. We like our old stuff. We don't want to show it. But that stuff blew my mind. But also, I had my first 2 tattoos done by one of the Waboripedia alumni, Hori K,
Okay.
Boston, Ruben.
Yeah.
So, those are walk-in tattoos. I'm pretty sure he was an apprentice at the time. And, I ran into him in Boston when I was visiting, like, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago from today, and, he spotted the tattoo on my arm. He's like, "Yo, I did that." I'm like, "Whoa, man, hold on." And then we reintroduced each other, introduced ourselves to each other, and it was like, "Oh, man." And then I realized later that he did Japanese, like maybe a month or 2 after I saw him. I looked him up. I went on the line. I was like, I knew where his shop was in Cambridge, and I was like, "Let me go look that guy up. What's he doing now? Like, what's his tattoos looking like?" Because the meeting was really brief, and it was really unexpected, and I was in the middle of, like, shopping for something, talking to a clerk about something, and it was cool. And then I went on to look him up, and I was like, "Damn, he's killing it. Alright, cool." So, it was I always felt like, looking back, like, all the people I was supposed to meet, even if they didn't play a role in my development, they still came across my path, and I ended up getting tattooed by them. Same thing happened, while I was in my black and gray journey. I met Brian McNeil, and he's another one that, blew my mind in the same way that Marco did. I saw the work he was doing at that time, and he came to work a guest spot at the shop I was at, which was totally unexpected because, again, not a haven for anything traditional. And I was looking at his work, and I'm seeing him sitting there drawing, and we hadn't been properly introduced, and I went and introduced myself or some variation of that, and I'm seeing him drawing and looking at Ichibe's book, and I'm like, "What is that? What is it?" And he shows me, he's like, "You gotta get a copy of this. This is amazing." And he tattooed me that day, and he was only in town for 1 day, and I was the only tattoo that he did that day. That shop was not the place for him, but he ended up there, and I met him, and that was a pivotal part of my growth because at that time, I was taking any excuse, like I was saying, I was out of the country when Joe called me, and I was always looking for an excuse to go somewhere because it was just about, not being in the same environment every day. And I would go to Boston and work with Brian McNeil when he was working there. And I probably went 4 or 5 times a year for like 2, 3 years. And then he eventually moved to Denmark and was working at Royal with Henning, and that was amazing. And now he's in Italy doing his thing. So, but I've kept in touch with him all these years. Same thing with Marco. And I always felt like those people found their way into my orbit on purpose. It was like a reminder, like, get back to it, get into it, keep going. And it's not something that I can really quantify, but I feel it, you know?
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, you know what? I feel like we talked about that actually, because I actually want to say a couple of things that we haven't spoken about here. But some time ago, I used to like post on Instagram, like, hey, I'm gonna make a post about this figure, about that figure. What are your recommendations for some, photos, some tattoos? And you were one of the guys who consistently send me some really cool shots, and I appreciate it. I was like, oh wow, this guy, he's not only, doing his thing, whatever, he's actually into it. He's actually passionate about it.
Yeah.
He shares his stuff. And I think we also talked about Horike doing some work on you. So
Yeah.
I recall that now. Yeah, that's true. And that's awesome. You also, it's also awesome that you started by appreciating ukiyo-e, which
Yeah.
is very
I didn't un
interesting.
I didn't un but the interesting thing about that is I didn't understand my influence was at all related to tattooing. I was just having fun drawing and painting lotuses in a pond with a koi underneath the water and, like a crane, in a lotus pond or, like, whatever it was. I was just looking at gongbi and ukiyo-e, and I was like, this stuff there's something here, like, and it was a lot more environmental and, like, nature related. My early influences was stuff I was painting and drawing, always flowers, always, koi, always, crane, always something like that, turtles. Stuff that I found really interesting about the Chinese painting was really loose and very fun, and all the subjects go right into Japanese tattooing, and then finding a lot of the ukiyo-e stuff, and then realizing that together, those things make up the entire pantheon of Japanese tattooing.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, and actually, I want to comment before I get to the next question. How it's interesting, comment more as I think to it myself. That I've interviewed a lot of great tattooers, a lot of great Horishi, and something that seems very common with the really great ones is like the stars aligned and the universe just worked into making sure that was their journey, right? All these influences that you wouldn't expect, it's just serendipity, whatever. It just the things aligned and they became who they were. And obviously, we're going to look at your work later, and so people can appreciate those who don't know you, the great work that you do. But I just wanted to remark that, yeah, also with you, the things that you're saying, that things just seem to align, and here we
Yeah.
are.
Yeah, I think it all starts here, you know? It happens inside you before it happens outside of you. And I think that my fear of fucking people up played a big role in my quality control in my career and wanting to really, like, fine tune my tattoos every time I did them because I had so many bad experiences vicariously in my early life, just having even tattoos I drew being ruined and being like, "That's not even the right spelling, that's crooked, this letter's bigger than it's supposed to be," like, all types of things you can't even imagine. I mean, I probably designed 50 tattoos in a year for tattoo parties and for people that were just going off somewhere to get tattooed. People would drive to New Hampshire and Rhode Island, you had to go out of state, basically. I mean, it's a short drive, but you had to leave the state to get tattooed, so that was very fundamental for me in understanding that, though other people's bad experiences became my learning experiences and my inherent fear that, like, then led me to, like, want to do it the right way. I wouldn't start tattooing even after my first apprenticeship. I because I didn't get handed the keys. I didn't actually have skin time. I lost that apprenticeship because of maybe some attitude things I had. I didn't really understand what being an apprentice was. I didn't really have that. So, and that was also a good experience. So, like, understanding that the bad things that happen to you are also the good things that happen to you in the long run. And of course, if you internalize that and you don't grow from it and you don't even acknowledge the things that you played a part in, then you don't have the opportunity to grow from them.
Yeah, that's deep. That's deep, and that's true. Cool. Well, actually, sort of like shifting gears, what we talked a little bit about your story, and why don't we talk about your style? If you can share
Sure.
whatever you can about your colors and your composition style.
So, composition, I think, is the biggest thing that I really focus on. Colors, I'm kind of more so open-minded to colors, and I pivot off my clients' likes and dislikes. I've even had a client who's colorblind, and I still want him to understand what we're doing. I still want him to like what we're doing, you know, like those kind of situations. But it's also, I think color for me is less about me, more about the client and also about the final result. So we have to find that happy space between what they want, what's going to look good, what's going to be accurate to Japanese tattooing. And I have those kind of restrictions where sometimes a good example, I guess, would be like um, Sakura. If somebody wants a hero motif and they want Sakura, especially if it's a human hero and it's a depiction that is um, warrior like, it's really important that they have red Sakura. You don't wanna mix it up. You don't wanna have pink sakura, pink here, red there, pink here. You don't even wanna do that because there's poetry behind the color choice in that red, and that red is intense, and it represents Bushido, and it has this whole poetic aspect to it, and the tie-ins with Sakura and Bushido and how I don't know, has anyone talked about that on here before?
Similar lines, but go into it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, just in terms of like, so like the samurai would look towards the cherry blossom and see themselves in the cherry blossom in a poetically, of course. And they would this cherry blossom blooms every year and it lives a short life, but it's celebrated from the time it's a bud to the time it's on the ground. And that life, even though it's short, is beautiful and it's celebrated. And the samurai weren't living long lives. They were living really difficult lives, training and fighting and putting their life on the line and also having families and doing all. So they had to have this understanding of the beauty of life and the shortness of it, the potential shortness of it. And you could be a Yamamoto Kansuke who lived to his 60s and be a samurai general and like, but that wasn't the reality for most of these guys. So that idea that the cherry blossom is like the warrior and in that it's celebrated for its life, whatever it is during that time. Always found that beautiful, and then hearing that then all this is something I've absorbed over the years. I think it's important to say that I'm no authority on any of these things, and when I'm regurgitating things that I've learned, read, heard, been told. So if there's any variance in that, then that's the reason. But hearing this and then also hearing that like the reason why red is important is because of that poetic aspect, the you know, it may be like the connection between blood and red and the sakura, but it also could just be the fact that they didn't have pink ink for a very long time, and there was no desire to even have that, I'm sure, like, it was, "This is what it is, you're getting a tattoo, the cherry blossoms are gonna be red." And then there's a lot that goes into red ink, and I'm sure you know about that, but it was a badge of honor to have red sakura on your tattoo, and it was very difficult to get the colors back then, which I think has also been talked about on here before. But to me, that's one of those things where like you have a hero motif, you owe it to yourself to have the right connection because this is an important part of it. You're getting something that has this huge, beautiful cultural connection with the imagery, with the subject matter, and with the way it looks. And it also looks a lot more badass, and it's a lot cooler. I'm a little more open to like if I have a young lady who's getting or a man who's getting a motif that's the tranquil, peaceful. They want pink cherry blossoms and they're adamant about that. I'm okay. I'm fine with that. But I also have the conversation with them when you get into other parts of your body, I know you're only doing a half sleeve right now, but when you get into other parts of your body and you are getting a back piece, if you ever get a back piece and you want a hero motif, now you have to do red cherry blossoms and now it's not going to look right. Now it's going to look very odd for you to have these cherry blossoms be pink, these cherry blossoms be red. I have that conversation with women too. It's not just a machismo thing. It's not just the heroes are not just for men, but it's more likely with the men. But I have those conversations with clients because I think it's important to always have perspective in mind and always have I'm going a little off topic here, but I think that's important. That's something I stress is having perspective for Horimono, even if you will never proceed to another piece. what we're doing right now matters, and it matters in terms of how it relates to the work later on. And I think that is inherently a huge part of it that is overlooked a lot of times in like Irizumi, when artists who like have a focus on Japanese stylistically, but not culturally, not being engulfed in it, not really understanding the fundamentals, not really. And then this, I'm sure there's a lot of things I miss. So I'm not a perfect example of this, but not for lack of trying, you know. And so back to the question, composition to me is really important. I think that movement, strength, aggression, beauty, finesse, being able to extend from one area of the body to another seamlessly, being mindful of ending points, being mindful of how cleanly ending points are done in places that don't extend, like going from the neck, you don't go up. It's not likely someone's going to go up. So this is an ending point on the back or on you know, if you're talking about the Hike and Wabori, these are ending points that are somewhat permanent, you know, and we want to make sure that they're absolutely perfect. And you don't always have to have the thought process of this will extend into this, because those are like those are soft permanent ending points, I guess, where it's not necessarily you don't have to think about that as much. But if you're talking about extending from a back to the rib panel, the side of the thigh to the front of the thigh, and you just have generic wind bars, and this is just an ending where you just have wind bar, wind bar, wind bar, just cut, paste, cut, paste, cut, paste, cut, paste. Unless you are Horishi who really has a defined style that is perfected, and I mean really perfected, like the people who are doing it that do that right, they it's leaps and bounds between the artists who are doing it because it's easy and because it's like, I could just do these wind, it's just a whip panel, just do some wind bars, all black, 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 black. And then next thing you know, they want something else, and you have to really figure out how the fuck that makes sense. So for me, I'm always thinking about that. I'm always thinking about movement. I want things to, I always look at subject matter. When you have a primary subject on a back, an arm, whatever, the 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 gaku is going to, the background is going to really define how it wears more than the subject oftentimes. You know, it might be different with serpents. It might like a snake or a dragon on a sleeve. There's a lot of movement. There's a lot of S shapes. There's things that really do change, but more stagnant images, whether it be a foo dog or a kitsune. Um, you know, these things are more so like you find the position, it goes on there, and then the background is doing all the movement, right? There's not a whole lot of moving and shaking, disappearing behind things, coming back out. That's more so the serpents or even koi, for example. But a lot of subject matter is like a floater, it's on top, and then you have the background. I've tried to find ways in my composition to make things interact. So whether it be a water flow going over a koi, that's a common one, or maybe air, clouds interacting with a foo dog. I like to do my foo dogs to where they are elevated. I prefer them on top of the body. It's not a hard rule, but I think, you know, the images of foo dogs for me, for example, just in terms of composition, my favorite motifs of foo dogs are when they're climbing high places and they're in the clouds. And, you know, there could be elements of water too, maybe waterfalls trickling down from this mountain that they're climbing or something like that. But I like incorporating things that can interact with the foreground too. And the way foreground, not just the thing that the thing is standing on or something like that. So I really enjoyed that part of it. I like using transparencies. I like doing when it applies. I don't want to make it a part of every single tattoo I do, but if I don't want to hit repeat on that trick every single time, but I really do think it adds to, and I'm hugely inspired by artists like Horiyoshi too, Tokyo, who is fundamental in that part of tattooing it from my experience, that like the work that he was doing was some of the first earliest stuff that I've seen where you'd have transparencies, you have subjects going behind wind, and disappearing and getting less and less visible by the bar, and then popping out in another place. And to me, that stuff is powerful, and I really like how it adds to a motif and adds mystery with a dragon or whatever it is. So I try to include those things in my own work. Um, Also, I think like compositionally, there's another aspect of it that's not often talked about. Um, and that is like this. I've heard another Horishi say. Um, I can't think of who it was, but I've heard a Horishi say that you have to choose between impact and beauty. And this is a Tabori artist. His work is very bold. I don't want to say for fear that I quote the wrong person, but I thought that was interesting because you can have both, I think, and that's where I strive to kind of find my middle. My middle as an American, as a Westerner doing this, is to find the middle between impact and beauty. Find the right amount of black where it still stands out, creates drama, because the black really does that. I think the black really creates that high contrast. And I try to find a mix between my black, my sumi, my subject matter, my skin breaks, which are also hugely important, and then also color. Um, and every single tattoo has to be a- attacked with that in mind. And I have to be mindful of the end goal before I'm even outlining. Because I'll give you an example. If I have somebody who's coming to me they want a black dragon. I need to have more tolerances for contrast if I'm doing a black dragon on black background. And if I'm doing a color dragon on black background, I can kind of get away with less, maybe a skin break on the outside of the subject, because I can bring that background right up to the subject and really get a lot of contrast for that color to shine. But if that person switches in the middle and they say, I changed my mind, I want a black dragon. Now we have to do tricks and make things work, and it's not the same. So I try to be really intentional with my composition, and I try to be mindful of the ways that I could step on my own feet along the way, or that my client can make me step on my feet. So having like very intentional conversations about what they want out of it before we start. I think that's really important for composition, because you can't always just outline something. Every line is just black and everything touches, background lines are touching the main subject, and then go, I'll leave these skin breaks later. Because then those are flaws, in my opinion, in my own work. If I have if I have a subject that needs a skin break border around the edge, but all my lines touch the subject, and then there's skin breaks with the shading, it looks like I missed I missed something that was very important. So there's like small things that go into this, and it's that aspect of that we talked about earlier, of my fear of fucking people up from before I was an apprentice, during my apprenticeship, during my early years of tattooing, and it lives in me today, so that I'm always like mindful of like how not to fuck things up. And it sometimes takes a little longer to do it that way, but I think that it's very much part of my process, and along with all the other things.
Yeah. No, it's very, very good to hear you say all those things because, as you were speaking, I was thinking about conversations I've had with people who, of course, I've interviewed many great tattooers on Horishi, but people others think, wow, these are legendary Japanese tattooers, and we speak privately, and they say many things that you just said, right? For example, about the backgrounds, about the importance of, let's say, the gradations, or how the backgrounds terminate, right? In fact, I remember one conversation where the Horishi said, hey, I can tell whether somebody's a master or they're starting out or trying to figure it out based on how they end the tattoo, right? For example, if it's an arm, right,
Mm,
whether you can continue it easily or not, you can tell, hey, is this person
okay.
really good
Yeah.
or not, right? And saying and the colors, and you were saying the contrast, etc. as well. I also wanted to call out what we were saying about the Karajishi up top, because many people might not know. If you go to Tokyo, for example, I'm sure there are other cities and prefectures where you have it, but you can find, for example, statues where there's exactly a story about that, right? The Karajishi on top of a cliff or a mountain, and then
Mhm.
the baby sort of going down, right? So there's actually a story about that. So it actually makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense that you
Like,
pursue that.
they train their young to be fearless, and they bring them to high heights, and sometimes they fall, but they're also relatively unkillable. So they have to learn that they don't have to be afraid, and that gives them the confidence to proceed. I think that that's also, it's also meaningful for the subject. It's not just this protective thing where food dogs oftentimes are looked at like it's a symbol of protection. And, you know, emperors would have them in their courtyards surrounded by peonies and cater to them, like trying to have peonies in their courtyard on purpose so that they would be able to survive easier and give them an environment that's home to a nomad, to a creature that would be a nomad naturally, but trying to give them a place to be in order to have that protection because these creatures are I believe to be loyal and have all these positive qualities and I think that I love the idea. I've got 2 sleeves of foo dogs with pups, with young foo dogs, and one of them was on my girlfriend, we just finished. I think that it's an opportunity to have fun with it in a way that's not been done very often. And, like, I don't wanna do 1,000 of them, but I love the opportunities when they come along to create these kind of motifs that are close to woodblock representations and close to those experiences you can have in Japan with the statues. And I think that's really important to look deeper than just the meanings that you can read on the internet or the meanings that you can read in a book. Sometimes they take a little bit of looking at things with a keen eye and just questioning why you see 3, 4 prints of the same thing. And, I find that a lot of Japanese tattooing is about that, and the deeper you get into it, you realize that even, I think it's been talked about, but clothing patterns are really important. You can't just mix and match. You can't throw some pattern for a woman's springtime attire on a samurai that's in a fall theme. And, there's real rules about things. And they're not just rules because it's like I say this and that's it. It's rules because they make sense. And you have to culturally understand what's going on in the environments in order to get some of those things. But others, like the food dogs, I picked up on wood blocks. I pick up from another big source of inspiration for me, and I know that's something that you oftentimes get to later, is like these, books of the temple carvings. I collect these books, they're something I sit with frequently, and I just absorb and try to burn them into my brain and just have these energetic compositions that are carved into wood just in my head to reference from at some point in the future. So it's to me, it's not just the ukiyo-e. Like I have a lot of my early inspiration in that, but I think there's so much more. I look at clothing patterns. I look at other sources. I look at porcelain. I look at netsuke. I look at all these different things that are amazing, beautiful representations, and the artists that were prominent in Japan or not prominent, and their work still lasts for us to see. Um, they're they're really important too. It's not just Kuniyoshi, as powerful and important as he is. You can't take a thing away from Kuniyoshi, but I think that as artists, we owe it to the culture to look deeper than just woodblock prints and just one artist or 2 artists. So or just the Horishi, because we have to understand what they were inspired by. Um, you know, I think that's all very important.
Oh, that's awesome. And yeah, we touched on multiple topics, which we can talk about right now because forget about the order. I mean, that's a conversation. Well, but I think it's very refreshing and very good to hear that you take the inspiration from, well, from the source, right? The temple carvings. Not many people, I've talked to a few who share that openly, right? But not many people actually do that or think about that. So that's very important. And then also, like you were saying, maybe to a non-Japanese person, the patterns are pretty patterns, and hey, why not this one with that one? But
Yeah.
they just don't understand that to a Japanese person, well, there's a reason for it, and it's like a natural reason. It's not like an obscure thing. It's just a
Yeah.
part of their daily life. They just know it, right?
Yeah.
Um,
One of my
so
one of my early influences or mind opening things with that was I was doing a one of my earlier tattoos, and I didn't know, I knew not to do anything on clothing patterns, and I just didn't know how to go about it. But I didn't have a reference that had a good readable, the references I was using were kind of hard to make out, and I just knew I couldn't tattoo that. So I went to Joe, and I was like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, that you gotta stay away from that. That's a fall clothing. There's different seasons, and different clothing applies in different seasons." And I just never thought of that, you know? So there's so many different aspects of this that, sometimes you need some people around you to put you onto, and other things you can pick up. And back to that, what we talked about earlier about having an environment where, you're around people that are like-minded is oftentimes very important for that kind of development and that kind of like mind-opening experience to be like, I need to do it this way. I need to look more into this. I need to do work to figure it out. And I'm nowhere near where I need to be when it comes to that stuff. I still am constantly looking at patterns and looking at stuff and trying to do the digging and background and Google search and looking through dozens of books at a time and just trying to figure it out. And it's not easy. And trust me, I don't think it's easy for the Horishi who really do it right either. I think it takes a long time for them to get to where it's easy. And I think that as Westerners, we have to work even harder. We have to be even, we're so removed from it that we have to like make it part of our experience within this to do those things right. So it is, so when I approach subjects, I'm looking at the wood blocks because I know certain artists absolutely have it right. And I might see two or three or four different prints, and I might see different clothing motifs, clothing designs on the same subject in different ones, but then I'm looking at the background because it might be the same subject, but not the same season, not the same situation. Sometimes the clothing is directly poetically influenced to represent the actual depiction that's happening. You might have something that adds some seasoning, some nuance to the whole motif, and if you don't know that, you don't know why you're using it. So you pick, a hero figure from this one print, and you take his clothing and put him in this other depiction where, like, I can't think of a good example right now, but maybe Benkei or someone that has multiple motifs and multiple different clothing relatively changing from artist to artist. And, it might be this motif or that motif. It's not always the same story. And sometimes that the things that go into that particular woodblock are important to that woodblock.
Okay.
Maybe less important to that subject and maybe not appropriate at all for another depiction. So I think that that's kind of important to be mindful of, and I think Westerners, we're all gonna make mistakes at some point in our careers. They will likely not be mistakes that our clients know about or that our clients care about or that affects them in any way, but it's our responsibility to make sure that we are always under our own eye loop, just keeping track of our own score and just constantly thinking about how to do things a little bit better.
Yeah. No, that's really good. I'm sure that a lot of people, whether they're watching or listening, are gonna really appreciate that, right? Because they can tell, hey, you're very serious about your work. Very, again, I used the word passionate before. I would say it again, very passionate, and you have a respect for it. Which
Yeah.
again, there are people. I tend not to associate with those kind of people, but there are people who just do it for the quick money or whatever. They're not serious, etc. But then this separates the wheat from the chaff, right? This
Yeah.
separates, the people who
I
are
think
really,
I think you can tell.
yeah,
I think someone who really cares as a client or as a tattooer can look at the other people and tell. And, I find it hard to keep those people in my eyesight. Like, when I can suss that out, I typically don't look at their work because I don't wanna be influenced in that direction,
mhm,
you know?
yeah, cool. Actually, let's dive a little bit deeper then, because one of the questions that I asked is about the client and Horishi relationship at multiple levels, right? We talk about, the relationship while you're getting tattooed, the selection process, etc. You sort of mentioned a little bit about that already, that you guide them, but I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add about.
Yeah, like, I start out the process by having an hour plus conversation like this. We have a video call just for the ease of use, not having to have people drive in town or across town or whatever. I have those conversations regularly. In fact, my voice is a little hoarse right now because I've had a couple this week, and it's a lot of talking. But yeah, I think that that's really important. I think that they come to us for the work, but they also come to us for help. Clients come because they need to know how things should be. And they might already, like, say, you, for example, I'm sure you approach tattooing different than getting tattooed, different than most, but the average client looking to get tattooed is at the very early stages. And I try to help those people be into the middle stages by the time we get tattooed. If I can, if they're willing, if they're open-minded. And if not, I'm going to make more decisions for them. But I'm going to also tell them this is these are our options and this is why this is probably the best option, and let's consider this. And I would like to not do that because maybe blue lotuses don't belong with your tiger, or maybe chrysanthemums shouldn't be done with your food dog, or some of the things like that, where where there's an actual tangible reason not to do these things. And and that's important for clients to have an artist that is not only knowledgeable but willing to include them in the experience, willing to make them part of the depth of this art form. Because I think it's not just for, like, customer service or something like that. I think it's really important because passion drives progress. If they are not passionate about the work that they're getting, if it's just a tattoo, they'll probably get 2/3 of the way through and never see you again, or when some monetary, road bumps in the road come, they're going to prioritize everything else above tattooing. Because, I mean, it's easy when you got the money and you're sitting on some tax return or something, and you want a tattoo, and it's just like, "Let me go get that sleeve." But it's hard when that tax return runs out and you have to finish your sleeve. Now it's 5 months later, and all you've got is an outline and 2 shading sessions, and you got 15, 20 more hours left on your sleeve, and you still have to budget, and you still have to be consistent, and you still have to show up, and you have to commit so much more of yourself than just money, but money is a big part, you know? So and that brings me to one of the things that I always tell people when I'm having these long consultations, is that the dedication that goes into this kind of work is oftentimes the hardest part. Don't worry about the money. Don't worry about I mean, you should be responsible with with the other parts of it, like your health and being energetically available when you get tattooed, not being depleted and just totally burnt out. But also, the commitment of this is a lot more than just those surface level things. Showing up and being excited about what's going to happen, showing up to every single day of aftercare, being prepared. Like, there's so much that goes into this. I mean, I'll have people who I have these conversations with where I feel like it goes in one ear and out the other, and that's not something I can control. So I still have the conversations, but I want people to know when they come in that we're going to start something that everything in my soul needs to provide you an opportunity to finish. I need this project to not go cold, like that first 48. You got 48 hours to solve a homicide. No, you got about a year to finish a sleeve. That's what it should be done in, like, at the most. If you can do it faster, kudos. But I think that timing is really important. And I think that in order to do it in a specific amount of time, it takes that kind of passion. And if I don't share more with my clients than just, "Hey, we're gonna do this thing. I'm gonna do it this way. It's gonna be this color." If I don't share the depth of this, then I think they're gonna go cold and not finish. I think maybe it's not true with everybody because some people just can't have something half done and just be happy. But that's a small portion of people's psyche. I think most people are kind of like they need to be invested in it in order to actually see it through. And we don't have the relationship with our clients in the West that the Horishi had traditionally in Japan, where you saw these people 4 times a week, 45 minutes of work, 30 minutes of work, an hour of work, and then I'll see you in 2 days. And then like, or I'll just see you to have smoke some cigarettes and drink some whiskey and and then have a little party after a session. We don't have those kind of experiences where we're so close and they leave for a month and they have to stay just as committed as when they came in that day, the next month, or longer. And the further you go from the time that you last got tattooed, the less enthusiastic you're going to be, the less quality your heel can be. I think your body even adapts to getting tattooed and the frequency of it. And I think that's part of the magic of the traditional way of doing things in Japan was get in, get a good bit done, and get to healing. And then I'll see you in a couple days and we'll do another little pat. And I think it's just not feasible for Western artists to do it that way. We want to do 3+ hours. I think it's reasonable to do things like shorter than like a marathon session. I don't do those kind of things. I don't push people to do a sleeve in one visit. Like I don't sign on for it because I don't think it's good to do that way. But also I think that I would like to be closer to how things were done traditionally as much as possible. And I think those shorter sessions. So I do 3 and 4 hour sessions. I do a day where we outline and I draw on the people for hours. And we sit and look at my designs and we go over, hey, what do you not like about this? What do you think about this? Oh, you love it? Cool. Well, I'll start talking about color in the first session because it's important to my composition. And we're not making permanent commitments to it. Someone can go from blue to green pretty easy. But if you're going from, like I talked about with dragons or something earlier, if you're going from green to black, now we might have some problems if I haven't tailored my composition. But with the clients, I think that that relationship, kind of to what you always talk about with people, that client relationship, and I think that it's natural to kind of. I think this is just a pivot into that conversation, but I think that's natural to have some kind of bond with these people that we're working on so much and we spend so much time with, especially the people who are gung ho and really go for it. I mean, I've got clients who have finished, um, you know, sixth eighths of 3/4 of a bodysuit in like 11 months. Like it's impressive and it's hard to ever think that I'll even come across those kind of opportunities. But I've had people do it, and those are the situations where like oftentimes the client bond becomes a little bit stronger, and a personality plays a part, and so does the client's desire to even have a conversation. I might have somebody who puts on headphones and gets tattooed, and we have a really good experience with each other, but it's minimal. The personal aspect of it is very minimal. And then I have others who I'll spend time with outside of tattooing or keep in touch with or text or whatever and send a album to this person because I know they'll like that. So there's it's nuanced. It's not one thing. Every single person's different than the next, and every single tattooer is a little different than the next. But I try to start out by having this really in-depth thing where we sit down, talk for at least an hour, and go over the ins and outs, and to make sure also not just about tattoos, but about the process, what I'm expecting of them, what I want them to commit to. And it's a soft commitment. I can't force anyone to get tattooed. I can't drag them by their ear. Come on back, coming into the shop and finish that back piece, or I can't. I can motivate them. And that's the passion that I try to put into it. And I try to make sure that that is with them and not just in here because they have to be motivated at home to get in here.
Mhm. That's awesome. That's very reassuring. That's very reassuring. That's one of the reasons why I like to ask it because people might be interested. in getting a tattoo from you from before, right? Or for whatever reason they didn't reach out to you, or maybe they're watching this right now and they're like, "Wow, this guy's pretty cool. Maybe I want to get something done by him." And so hearing you say these things, I'm sure it's very reassuring for prospective clients. Cool. Well, actually, let me shift gears super dramatically in here. But we talked about composition style, and you mentioned a couple of figures. Do you actually have like a favorite subject or theme to tattoo?
Out of all the things you ask, that one is probably the hardest because I really have fallen in love with just about everything in the pantheon of Japanese tattooing. And I find it's easier for me to say what I don't like than it is what I do. But and even the things I don't like, I still would love to tattoo them, but under the right scenario. So I'll give you an example. Somebody wants a sleeve with an octopus. We have to have a real conversation about what happens after that. What goes into that? How is this octopus in a river with a koi? It doesn't make sense. So I have those kind of things where it's not that I don't like them, but it's that I don't want to do them without the foresight, without the big picture, without someone being aware that it's just not going to make sense. You don't put a turtle, and again, these things are very specific, just like clothing patterns. The type of turtle that's represented in Japanese tattooing is not a ocean turtle. It's not that. They have an entirely different flippers and the structure that it's not. So you can't say, "Hey, I got this turtle and this octopus and they're hanging out together." It doesn't make sense. So I try to have those conversations because some of the things that I like, the idea of I don't like what they're going to do to the bodysuit that the person may have eventually. And I kind of feel that way about the tattooed animals too, like frogs with tattoos and doing these small things. There's a longevity aspect to these highly detailed things. Um, and there's also a bit of a popularity to them that's very new and trendy. And then I always question, like, how are you gonna feel? Is it gonna be as cool? Because I really think that that one of the most beautiful things of Japanese tattoos is that you can see something done in the early 1900s on a guy that's in his 80s, and he was, like, maybe Depression era getting tattooed American Depression era, getting tattooed in Japan, and you see pictures of him in his 70s and 80s. Maybe the pictures are from the 70s or 80s, and he's in his 70s and 80s, and you see this bodysuit and it's amazing, like, whoa. So I always wonder, like, the things that are really trendy that are not part of the original traditional experience, I'm always a little skeptical about those things because I don't want to follow trends and just um do things because they're cool in the now. I think that the part of Japanese tattooing that is everlasting is a little bit has more perspective for longevity. But okay, so things I do like. And again, I don't hate those things. I just think that we need to think more. We need to be a little more deliberate. But the things I do like, I love dragons. I love snakes. I've been excited to do more snakes and the ones I've gotten. I mean, I just finished one with like a small touch-up session that had been done for a year and a half. And, my client was moving to Hawaii. He's like, "Hey, I gotta get in with you." I'm like, "Come on, I've been waiting to finish." And I posted that one recently, but really it's quite a bit older. But still, I look at it and all the choices we made in his leg are phenomenal to me. I think that it paid off. Even waiting all that time to finish it was not necessarily a chore. It was just I'm happy to have it done, but those are the things when I feel like that make me wanna do more of them. So, that could change from this year to next, and I think that's the beauty of it, like, really being passionate about one thing and then another thing and then another thing, and being able to be flexible in the middle where people want other things and people want different subjects, and, I've been doing a bunch of kitsune. I really love the look of kitsune, and I try to I try to make it part of the experience for somebody who wants a kitsune to really have that conversation about what you're getting and how the context to Japanese culture can be. And are we just doing a nine-tailed kitsune because it's got fire on it and it looks cool? And you like the story of a badass thing, or do you understand what that subject really is? Because that's a pretty that's a pretty dark one. And if you were Japanese, then you might think twice about putting that on you. And I mean, maybe you wouldn't. Obviously can't speak for anyone, but I think that if you have the reference to, if you have the some context to what these subjects are, that you're going to make better choices for yourself. And personally, I would rather do a one-tailed kitsune and have it be um a beautiful tattoo. It doesn't take a lot of losses. Like I have a back piece with a nine-tailed kitsune right now, and we made it off of the famous wood block where it's a triptych, and it's got the three scenes of the archers shooting arrows into it, and we focused on the middle scene, and it's got, it's kinda like almost like looks like he's squealing out in agony as he's being struck with arrows, but it was really important that, like, to me and my client, that that back piece was representative of the fall of that creature, not the not it persevering and not it conquering and not all the negative things that came with this thing that plagued people in these stories. Because like the emotion that goes into that is him wearing it is different if we have the correct usage of it. So, yeah, I mean, if you I've heard it from other people before, but the how you do things is just as important as what you do.
Mm, that's awesome. That's cool, man. That's cool, man. What about stuff that you want to tattoo if there's like a subject or a theme or a scene or whatever that you really want to do, but for whatever reason you just haven't done it yet?
So I also think in terms of like bodysuit when I'm thinking of when I really have these like desires to do something, I would love to do like a Tamatori Hime's bodysuit, but it takes a commitment of getting an ocean theme for the whole bodysuit. And that's a hard one. I don't expect anyone to sign up for that. People love flowers. They don't really belong. People love koi. They definitely don't belong. But for someone who loves octopus, maybe they should be thinking that way, because that whole suit is going to be water. Maybe you can get away with some air at the top because she's trying to rise to the surface. But in reality, that's a water suit. And it's not just a water suit, it's an ocean suit. And that's important to that story. And I mean, if you're being technical, she never rises to the top. She cuts a rib and puts the pearl inside as she's rising to the top, knowing that her body would float and that the pearl would be rescued because the Dragon King couldn't come get it. But so maybe, if you're being technical, you don't even want air and clouds at the top of that suit. So you're stuck with a whole body full of water and it's ocean water. To me, that's powerful. I mean, I think that would be amazing. I think it would be really fun to look at. I think we could have fun with the subject matter. I think we can do ocean creatures. I think we can do a lot of water, and I love tattooing water and the flow of water. Equally as much as I do air, I think that they both have different places and they both have different beauty and nuance. And whether it be a storm or less more tranquil air, I think that that also draws me in just as much. But doing a suit full of air or a suit full of water in some context to me is exciting. But also, I would love to do like a Benzeten suit with because she's the her serpents are like her messengers. I would love to have the suit with the dragon on the back and snakes on sleeves and all the things that go along with her incorporated in the bodysuit. I think something like that would be beautiful. And I think also she's just an amazingly beautiful subject. And I think that aside from the deep meaning that comes with getting a deity on you, that, you know, I think that the imagery itself is some of the most beautiful in all of the images in Japanese tattooing. And I really love the connection where it's um well, let me say this. I can't sell people on religious figures. That's one thing I really, really, really have worked on. I cannot sell people on religious figures and I can't sell people on bodysuits. they have to want it. They have to be fully engulfed in the inspiration and passion and feeling the presence of that deity before they get it. Otherwise, it's not gonna happen. They're gonna end up with a half-finished back piece, and then, you have this goal to do a bodysuit, but the back piece never gets finished. So, it takes 10 years to finish the back piece, the bodysuit's never getting done. That's just how it is. So, with that being said, like, even though I wanna do these things, I wanna do them in the right context. I wanna do them with the right people. I want clients who are driven towards these things to find me, and then we can proceed and create something amazing. But you know, you can't pick them and stick them. You can't do that with this kind of subject matter. I could do that with a koi or a foo dog or even a dragon, but you cannot just sell somebody on religious figures, because I think there's ultimately something so much deeper within that imagery that controls whether or not the person is going to finish it. It maybe they're not living right and they've got a fudo on their back. They maybe fudo won't even let them finish until they get their life together, or kanan, but you don't have compassion. You don't have empathy. How are you going to finish that? Are you going to have the energy needed? Are you going to have the spirit and the passion to get the thing finished when it's so fucking hard to do? It is not. This is none of this shit gets done like you see stuff finished on Instagram, and people can be really enamored by these things they see online, magazines, books, but it's fucking hard. And I know you're working on your suit, so I know it takes a lot, and I think it takes even more if the thing you're getting does not belong on you. So, Benze 10 is another one that I would love to do. Phew, believe it or not, my first sleeve I ever did was Manju Bosatsu. The client came to me and he had all these ideas. This is my first sleeve, mind you. So this kind of gives you a little bit of insight to like my thinking on these things. My first sleeve client comes to me. He goes, I really want my father's Japanese. My mother is a white American, and I want something that represents both sides of my heritage. So I want a sleeve of Japanese traditional. I want a sleeve of American traditional. Obviously, I'm down, and I'm gonna, I'm talking to him about things that may go into the tattoo, and nothing leads us to all the stuff you'd expect. It's no dragon talk. We end up doing Manju because he tells me that that his mom always wanted him to be a student and him to be really passionate about learning, and it was really important to him. And maybe I'm remembering some of this wrong, but we ended up with this long conversation like I have with my clients now, and we ended up doing Manju with sitting atop the food dog on his arm. And to me, that was incredibly meaningful for me to start my career in Horimono doing it that way. And not just doing Manju as a one shot or something like that, but as a whole sleeve with all the background, with all that. And I think that was important. And I think that because of that, I always think I would love to do a Manju back piece. I think that would be amazing. But again, it has to be right. I can mention subjects to people. I can't make them commit to it. I can't push them too hard to get these things. I even send people home with homework. Like, I want you to look into this. I want you to understand it. I want you to read about it. I want you to really get your mind around this because you're getting a God on you. And that's not light. That's important. It's not dark, it's not that kind of thing, but it's heavy. And it's important that you think about the things you're getting because they're going to represent you. They're going to be with you. They're literally going to have your back if you get a back piece. And those things are going to carry some energy with them. I mean, if you think about the very basic level of getting a tattoo, if you get a tattoo of a religious image, deity, God, whatever it is. It could be Christianity, it could be anything. It's kind of like a blood sacrifice. You're giving up money, blood, energy. you're stressing, you're giving up these things that are valuable to you. And then you're getting something that will be equally as valuable to you or more as you move through life. And that to me is even more powerful when it comes to the religious deities because they're not something that like the artist should be telling people they should get. They should something that we can introduce people to, but they have to make the decision. Brian McNeil did my Fudo on my arm, and I didn't have any plans to get Fudo, but he made a suggestion and I made a decision. I thought about it. It wasn't quick. It wasn't like, yep, let's do it. It was, I looked into Fudo. I bought Immovable. I didn't have the book yet. It was my introduction to Fudo. I read about Fudo. I got the tattoo. I might have committed before I finished reading the book, but I understood what I was getting to some degree. Maybe not definitely not to the extent that I understand Fudo now, but like I have him, I don't know if you can see it right here in
Yep.
my studio. Um, and I think and that's meaningful to me because my first, you know, big meaningful tattoo was a Fudo. So, um, I think people should weigh those options and really think about those things because like the payoff, if that is the right thing for you is enormous. And I think in Fudo for me, and the reason why I brought it up, but Fudo being tattooed on me totally changed my like trajectory. My career, I think it's added so much passion, so much fire, so much commitment, so much I mean, I can't quantify that any other way than feeling. You know what I mean? It's what's the word? Ethereal. I have to just think that that one decision made me better and gave me a lot and added a lot to my life. But I can't force people into that because that's not how it goes, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I know. And you brought up three great ideas because when you mentioned the first one, the Tamatori, the full ocean bodysuit, I thought it was damn, that would be pretty awesome. All that dynamism in the water and in the
Yeah.
figures, right? That'd be
I mean,
sick.
just a bodysuit full of water. Senju has a print of a woman wearing a full water bodysuit. Have you seen that one?
I think I have.
And, so I have that hanging in my studio, and I love water. I would love to do a suit full of water, and I would also love for it to have a theme and for it to like, I understand why people say they wanna do suits with just no subject matter except the natural elements, but I think that it could be just as powerful with something on the back. Something sporadically kind of happening in other parts. It doesn't have to be all piled in and content everywhere. You can have a whole thigh with nothing but waves and water and a lobster on your calf, you know, you know, the other thigh has an octopus just totally engulfing the leg, and that's powerful. It doesn't have to be 50 things. Like, there's an expression in tattooing, like, you don't wanna put 50 pounds of shit in a 20-pound bag, and I think that breathing room is really important and that, like, those kind of motifs, if somebody's really mindful of, like, mindful of, like, a bodysuit and how that goes, and how you approach a bodysuit, you can get the back piece, you can leave you get as long as you have in mind how you would go about it. It doesn't have to be you can build it. You don't have to necessarily have everything dialed in from inception, but just being bodysuit minded, Horimono minded is gonna take you a long way in terms of the final outcome of the work. And I think that, like, an ocean theme would really be the ultimate use of this. Or maybe equally with maybe shared with like, I would love to do a Donbori suit with Raijin on one side and Fujin on the other, and then nothing else except lightning, clouds, air, movement on the whole rest of the suit. Or, you know, maybe you can do some drums on the thighs or, you know, some kind of things like that, but you're not dying to fit 50 pounds of shit into the 20-pound bag that is a bodysuit because, I think the breathing room is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and that's one of the things that sort of it's not the only thing, and it's not 100% rule set in stone. But when you look at Japanese versus, let's say, traditional American It's Japanese. You don't fit a bunch of shit into the picture, right? That space is important. That the background itself is very important. That's one of the things that I think you mentioned earlier, and a lot of people, masters say that the importance of the background. So not looking to fit a million things into a forearm, for example,
Yeah.
very important.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, especially when people are just thinking smaller, like, "I want a half sleeve," and they're talking about this.
Yeah.
Just a little more perspective will take you a long way, and you gotta because if you put 3 or 4 subjects on a half sleeve that's going in the wrong direction, shouldn't really do the forearm instead of the upper, but if you're doing that and then you decide to get your upper, now you've got so much shit going on, and then it's just a clusterfuck and nothing is impactful. It's the negative spaces of skin breaks in every wind bar, the negative spaces the skin that shows through on light gray as opposed to the weight of black. Then the use of black and how it adds contrast. All these things are adding to the composition, and if you just throw things in everywhere, you don't actually get that contrast, and you don't get that beauty of the gaku, which is really telling the story of the subject. You've got your subject, and that's the thing that you want people to look at first, but then you've got the gaku, which is telling the story. It's painting the picture of the environment. It's telling you so much about it. If you've got grass on the rocks, it could represent fertility. It could represent growth. It can represent a lot of things that, just even small little details, those little bamboo berries that you see on the rocks. They're sure they're there to break up the black. I'm sure in their creation, there was probably a little bit of like, I want to break up the black and put some more color in around here. I'm sure along the way, people were just Horishi were just thinking like, I want to do something different. And they ended up with that. But there's also room for a lot of meaning, even with those things. And if you're putting multiple subjects, you're not going to have room for those extras, or you're not going to have room to even think about how to decorate this tattoo in a way that's meaningful and compositionally excellent.
Mhm. 100%. Cool. Well, actually, in a couple minutes, we're going to look at some of your tattoos so people can appreciate some of your work. Obviously, I recommend they do go to your page and check all the stuff that you've published. But before I do that, since people are going to see a bunch of Suikoden
Mhm.
figures, I wanted to ask you, do you have a favorite character
Um,
or scene from Suikoden?
so, like, I probably got a top 10, like, but, and I mean, my top 10's probably really close to a lot of people's top 10s because like, there's a lot of characters that are just non no, not as important, when
Yeah.
you get into even the way that they're numbered in the Stars of Destiny or whatever it's called, like, drawing a blank, but, they, most people would probably pick the ones that I would put in my top 10. But I also and especially when it's in terms of tattoo, like, if you're talking about the book, um, it's easier to like some of the other characters for their values,
Uh,
right? Than others, like, who might be cannibals or, you know, um, all types of different goons, thugs. It's hard to like some of these characters that are the most impactful to the story. Like, some of the most important characters in the story are hard to like. You hear them just doing all this crazy stuff all the time, like Black Whirlwind. He's one of my favorite that I've tattooed. Um, However, when I read the book, he pissed me off. He was always doing something. I'm like, "Man, you gotta chill, man." Like, yes, powerful. Yes, one of the best fighters. Yes, like, he was loyal, but he was doing some reckless stuff going off script. So, like, it's different if you ask me what I like from the book versus what I like from tattoo perspective is different because I love tattooing the back piece. That to me is a powerful back piece, and I loved taking on that character and the challenge presented in representing that character in a way that wasn't exactly a woodblock, but fit my client perfectly. But I would say from a tattoo perspective, my first back piece with one of these heroes is my favorite, and that's Kaosho. Kaosho Roshishin is definitely my favorite because, um, number one, he's the most prominent person in the story. The story kind of like follows him around pretty much, and it starts with him, follows him, and then he pops back in the later parts and everything. And you'd be amiss to not mention him in the top five or anything. But to me, that one opened some doors for me. I was really becoming familiar with the story when we started that, and my client, I'll get into that if we look at that one, but yeah, that one opened doors for me, and then it also opened people's minds to getting heroes from me. So people were seeing the works I was working on, but the one that was finished first was absolutely that, and it was very meaningful that that was the one that it was like a race. I had like 3 back pieces in my early career that I was all kind of finishing close, and I was like, "Who's gonna get there?" Because you never know when someone's gonna come in sometimes, it's like book a few weeks out, but, or a month out or whatever, but you don't really know if it's gonna be consistent the month after that or whatever. So, that one, I was like, "I really wanna finish this one first," I really wanna get this done because I really felt it. I felt like it was gonna motivate people. I felt like other people would be inspired by it. And then I was learning more about the story, so I could tell people about it, and I can be like, "Hey, this guy right here, you should look into him," and at the same time, I'm sharing stuff too on my social media, and I'm making my clients more informed at the same time, which is a big part of what I do. But, I had people coming to me like, "Here's my guy." And that's hard to imagine for most people. For someone to really go in and read that book, or even just, like, read the cliff notes or whatever, and listen to the podcast. There's a good podcast with it. I've actually listened to that and went back and forth to the book because there's some good cultural context. Like, "Oh, in this part, he mentions that it was 2 gold pieces." And that would be the equivalent of such and such amount of money today or something like that. Like, I really like that podcast for that. It gave me a lot of insight to understand the book better, but I think that's really accessible to a lot of clients, and they're coming in and they might hear about a hero and then go look up the woodblock prints and then go look up the story and then ask me about it, and then we begin the process of them getting that. And I obviously I make sure that they understand a little bit more about them too, make sure that they like have read about it because you might not wanna get the cannibal or, you might not wanna there's certain ones that if you just like the woodblock print, you might not want to get, so, with some background at least. So, I would say that's my favorite, but also, hmm, I would say my favorite okay, so as a tattoo, that one was totally my favorite, but there's one scene from the story that's my favorite, and I'm willing to bet you could guess, but it's, Shogun at the Watergate. To me, that one is, like, quintessential Japanese tattoo. Just I was excited when I got to do it. Um my client was, like, on another subject. I think he wanted Kumareyu, and I just was like, "Cool, that'd be dope too." And then he last minute was like, "Yo, Chosen." I'm like, "Whoo." Like, you pivoted to something equally as cool, like, and more so to me because that story is just badass. Like, I mean, you talk about a martyr, you talk about someone that went down to try to keep the ship from going down, just going all out, guns blazing. That to me, that one scene is really, really powerful. And it's no surprise why it's like probably I mean, I've heard someone say it's the most common traditional motif in Japan out of everything. I don't know if that's true, but man, it's understandable when you think about like everything that went into that one scene, like, it's and how cool that character is, like, Shojan and his brother are just man, they're impressive, like, these guys that could do, like, superhero level things, just jumping clean out of the water for, like, 20 feet and landing flat-footed on the deck of a ship ready to fight, like, stuff like that is really, like, impressive to me, like, and I really think that, that one scene kinda, like, was my favorite out of all of them.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, let's actually look at your work. Let me share.
So this piece here, this is a while back. So My client here has actually finished his arm, finished his whole front with Dunbori, no spacing in the middle, and he's started on one of his legs. So we've made incredible progress with his suit, and that was my first one. That's the cow show I was just referring to. Now this one was definitely a learning experience. I'll talk about something that was it only enforced my diligence about having the bodysuit conversation with people early on, in that in his sleeve you see on his right side, there's a phoenix in that sleeve, and we did maple leaves. Maple leaves were his preference, and mm, I really wasn't there was no talk of a bodysuit yet, and I just hadn't had that diligence to, um I really wasn't at that place at that point to really, like, be like, "No, we need to talk about the back. We need to think about the back." It was like, "Cool. Alright, you want this? You want that? Let's do it." Um, but then we get to the back, and he's become enamored with, Cowshill. And as you know, Cowshill being the flowery monk, he always has tattoos that are of spring flowers. So, there's a little bit of a I wouldn't call it a mistake, I would call it a deviation from tradition and a deviation from, like, the original representations of Cowshill. Whereas he has his tattoos where they are, cherry blossoms, but he's surrounded by a fall theme, fighting the snake. This how we had to do it. We weren't going to switch to a motif that was, after doing his arm already, we weren't gonna just jump into, his back and start doing cherry blossoms everywhere. It would clash too much, and we both agreed that it was a better idea to keep the seasonal motif going and to depict cow show in a different environment than the story originally projected. But, one thing that I think is something that was important to me in thinking and just wrapping my mind around that when we got to that point, and I mean, he was adamant, very adamant about this particular hero. Like, we talked about 10 different motifs, and we went back while I'm working on his sleeve, he's already got the bug. He's totally, um, enamored by 2 or 3 of the 10 we talked about, but he kept coming back to Cowshill. He's like, "Yeah, I've been hearing that story on the podcast, and man, I think it's gotta be Cowshill. It's gotta be Cowshill." I'm like, "Alright, so here's the thing. We've gotta make some changes to how this would normally be done, and that his environment is gonna be different than what it is traditionally." But tattoos don't stop in a season. It's not like, spring kimono in the fall. To me, this is a bigger, um, fault in a design. It's like some article of clothing that should only be worn in this season. This one, and maybe that's a summer kimono. It's very light and flowy. There's not a lot of layers. That's not this. This is him in his attire that the story, like, pretty much says he wore all the time. He always wore the monk's attire. And it's just him represented in another part of another season. So I think, tattoos live throughout the year. They don't stop in a season. They don't come off of you when the fall gets here or so forth. So to me, that was like a saving grace for that, and I feel great about it. And he wears it well, and man, one thing I love about doing this kind of work is just hearing my clients' stories about how people's minds are blown. Like, man, I went to Cancun, and just those kind of stories where it's like I was at the pool, and man, everybody's eyes were on me. Everyone kept talking to me. Hey, hey, where'd you get that? Where'd you get that? And to me, that's not about me. Like, I don't hear that and feel like, oh, I'm popular or something like that. To me, that's about him. Like, knowing that he got to experience that his hard work paid off, that he was able to achieve something that other people admire, even without knowing about it. They have no idea what this is on his back. The average person that sees this is both amazed and probably a little confused. Like, what is it? What's going on? What's underneath your waist? What's going on in the legs? Are you, like all these different questions. Like, is your butt tattooed? Like, so that these guys that get this kind of work, and ladies, they really get to experience a different part of life where they get to inspire people. They might be walking past somebody who eventually gets a bodysuit because they saw them. To me, that's pretty cool. So he's one of the people who has been that to me. He's been definitely always keeping me in the loop about stuff like that, and I really love those stories.
That's awesome. No, some what one thing I really like about this piece. Obviously, I love Culture too as a character and as a tattoo, but the snake, the serpent's or snake's head, I love it. The sizing, I think it's perfect and it's very impactful. So I just wanted to
Thank
call that out. It looks great.
thank you. I really appreciate that. We wanted it to be uh, a fair fight or something of the sort. This guy is incredibly powerful. And if he was fighting any smaller of a snake, we would just snap it in half and, like rip the head off with his bare hands. But no, he needs his bat. He needs his I God, I'm forgetting the name of the weapon. But but that's important to the story, I think, like and this is one that you don't really have ukiyo-e references to support. So we're going off of a common motif in Horimono that doesn't exist in ukiyo-e, to my knowledge. Um, and all of the Suikoden images from various artists represent him um, a lot, and there's good references out there for him, like what he's supposed to look like, facial features, all that. I even put a little stubble on the side of his head. I pictured him having like this kind of like he's always shaving to keep the monk look, but it's growing back and a little faster in some places than others. He's a drinker and he lives a crazy life, and I thought that was just like little details like that. But this was a really fun one, and it was my first. It wasn't my first back piece, but it wasn't even the first one I started or second one I started, but it was the first that I finished that was really in line with the work I wanted to do and a little and more traditional because my first back piece was actually a tiger and it had a lot of influence from more neo-traditional approaches. And, I think that it really fit that client really well, and we ended up coming up with something that really looks great on her, but it wasn't the thing that I want to do in my own work traditionally on and on and on and on and so forth. So, this was one of the first ones where I got to tailor after a ton of sleeves in between, like, this is not like I just picked up and changed everything, but, like, figuring out my own style and my own stuff and how I'm gonna draw certain things, and a lot of this tattoo is a culmination of that earlier stuff, and then going into some of the other works that we might see after are probably newer.
Awesome. That was awesome and a great intro. I could get why people saw this and then they wanted more. They wanted more of this kind of stuff. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Cool. All right, let's go to the next picture.
Yeah, that's him again, same client, and because the, Busho is the hero that's depicted here, and he also was a drinker, and we love that about his character, that he liked to party and he was just, like enjoying himself in this pub and he goes to leave and all the locals are like, "Dude, you can't go out there, man. What are you doing? There's a tiger out there. He's killing people." He's like, "Psh, Tiger Schmeiger, I'm off." And then he just goes and kills it with his bare hands. And like to me, that story is really cool. And also it ties in, subtly with the whole like aspect of Kausho being a prominent drinker and a party guy himself, and also having that hot-headedness of like and confidence in battle that Kausho has. They both kind of have that, in them. But also in the story, they're kind of like comrades. So we went over a couple different options and we were like, "Hey, we could do this guy or this guy or this guy," but we knew we wanted to do the whole front, Donbori, and he didn't want Munawari at all, and, to me, that was an opportunity to do something really different, and this one was a hard one to actually design to fit him the way it does, and I think it wears really well, and he loves it, and I mean, I'm glad because he gets to see it. This is probably 3 years after we did his first sleeve and started his back, and maybe 4 years after we started the sleeve. So, he gets to see this one the most out of all his tattoos, and on the left in that photo, you see the his right-hand side, you see that phoenix I was talking about. That was his first sleeve. So I'm really proud of that as well. All the tattoos I've done on him, I'm really proud of, and I love the way he's been super consistent and even through like ups and downs in life and just being present and getting the work done in a really meaningful way and just showing up time and time again.
So, obviously, I love these the tattoos and the Gaosho one as well. I know I mentioned the snake as being the one that struck me the most, and in this one, actually, the tiger. I love the tiger in here as well. I love the busho, of course, but the tiger because I've noticed in Japanese tattoo, I'm sure in other areas as well, but not that many people get tigers right. They don't look that good. I gotta say the quiet part out loud. Not many people can do nice looking tigers, but this is it's a great looking tiger. So I wanted to call that out. It looks great. Obviously, the busho again looks fantastic, but it's fierce and it looks like a tiger. It doesn't look like a rat or
Yeah,
So
and, with this, it's like I wanted 2 things, like, and some of this is present in the wood block for this image. Obviously, there had to be some changes made to it to fit his anatomy, but, um, the things that were present in the wood block that really struck me was the fear in the tiger's face,
yeah.
but he's still ferocious. Like, you still see some ferocity in him, and he's like, "God damn it, he might have got me," but he still looks like a killer, and I think the eyes were important to that, and I think that the frown and the nose was really important to that, so I tried to take the wood block and make it my own, but not make it not bastardize it, and also with Calcio, being that he just left the pub, like, I wanted him to look like he's intoxicated, like, and you've got this red eye, a strain in his eyes, but this look on his face that he's like, "Man, I will beat your ass. Get out of here, tiger." Like, he doesn't even look fazed by the fact that a tiger ran up on him. And I don't think either of us would have that same reaction, but this guy is powerful and, even in his weakened state with all that alcohol, or maybe strengthened, depending, he is a drinker, it might have gave him a boost, but, he was able to just conquer this thing that was just mauling people left and right. I really like that about it. So I tried to convey that in how we did it, and, it was really fun doing a gourd on his other rib. You don't see it in this picture very much, but there's a cool gourd on his rib where he takes some of the drink to go. I thought that was important too, 'cause that's one of the things in the woodblock print that I didn't wanna, like, do without. I took some liberties on this. There's 3 different if my memory serves, it's been a couple of years now, but, um, if my memory serves, there's 3 different wood blocks that I sourced different details from, and trying to make like we talked about earlier, making sure that they, like, belong in this particular motif, but there are more than one of him fighting the tiger, and I sourced from all of them for little things to kinda bring the personality into it that I liked, that I wanted, including his the chain around his neck, having the different colored beads, and having the little box on the end of it. Um, Thought that was really cool and kind of played into because one of the prints doesn't have him with that at all, and the other one does. So I took that from one of them and introduced it to the other. And then also, being that Calcio has the beads on as well, the monk beads as well, I thought that it would be a really nice feature to have on both sides and kind of bring their bond together as brothers, even if it's just symbolically through one item.
No, this is awesome. Like you mentioned, actually, one of the important things in Japanese tattooing is the eyes, right? A lot of people, for example, finish. That's the last thing they'll do because they're so impactful, they're so important. So I like how you commented that, yeah, the tiger's eyes and then also Busho's eyes, right? He's like,
Yeah.
he's pissed by the tiger, right? He's not phased by it. He's like annoyed
Yeah.
by the tiger. That looks awesome, man. Looks
He's
great.
like, "Now I gotta waste all this energy killing you."
Yeah.
It's not even like a chore.
That's fun. No, this is great. Cool. All right, let's move on to the next one.
So, this one is obviously a dragon, but, more specifically, this is the famous Dragon's Gate. And I'm kinda picky about doing the Dragon's Gate themes because I really wanna represent them well, and I really wanna represent them as a struggle for the koi that are coming up this waterfall. So for anyone that doesn't know, um, there's a river in China where all the koi swim upstream in the mating season. And then at the end of the river is this 100+ foot waterfall that's just a sheer face of water. And times of the year, it's like heavy flow, it's just cascading down. And then the koi try to swim up that waterfall. I believe it's the Golden River. And I think that even the waterfall has the nickname of the Dragon's Gate. But the the trouble with depicting this on sleeves or, properly depicting this on sleeves or even back pieces is that there's a lot of space required for such a elongated motif. You really have to make it seem like these koi are coming up a huge amount of water to try to crest the top of the waterfall. And then the story goes, for anyone that doesn't know, that when they get to the top, they turn into a dragon. So even our choices in how to do this reflect in the dragon because it's said that the dragon is and the youngest dragon is a black one, and that was why we chose the black scales on this one. You could see it's almost like he's in his first, you know, um, morphing from just becoming a koi. And sometimes you see that as a dragon koi a lot of times in motifs, but I've got a really cool dragon koi back piece I'm working on too, and I'm excited about that. But this one that we because we wanted to do the Dragon's Gate, it was really important to make sure that we had a lot of space. So he already has some tattoos on his a lot of tattoos around his whole body, but on his legs, he has some on his calves. So we were pretty confident that he didn't want to extend it. He didn't want to like have an awkward amount of space between those old tattoos and our back piece. So we brought it down to the back of his knees proper, like which is much further than we usually bring a back piece down with a kami no ko. So this to me was like a one-off exception where he's probably, I mean, based on him and based on what he's told me, that he doesn't have intention on going past a back piece. So, and part of that is probably because of all the tattoos he got prior to finding Horimono. But he basically was like, "Hey, I just want to, like okay with going a little further down, and it'll eliminate some of that awkward space in between the tattoos on the calves that are just outside of this picture. Like this picture is cropped right at the top of them, I believe." And, it gave us that opportunity to get more space, which I thought was important because you really want these koi to look like they really might not make it. And if you have a shorter cut on the bottom of a back piece, just get a dragon. Even if it's just half of the distance from the thigh, like, say, for example, where, the top of the main part of that, chrysanthemum is on the right leg. If your back piece ends right there, then you have not a lot of room to really tell the story of the Dragon's Gate, unless you really just force this waterfall up to the middle of the back, and then that might look a little awkward. So, to me, the real sweet spot for where this waterfall would be right around his love handles and lower rib, hips, and then I brought it down in the middle of his lower back. I wanted this kind of like a U shape in that so it wears really well. If you've ever seen like some of the woodblock prints of the Suikoden heroes, they have like, and even Shoki has it. It's like a side piece that's like a piece of clothing or maybe armor, and it like wears just like that, where it like goes to the middle of the back and stops. It goes to like the side of where his where the waterfalls kind of stop on the right side. It's like ends right there on the front and the back, and then a belt holds it all together. I thought like just compositionally, all these things would look really nice because like those outfits look pretty cool and they're wearing them. And if we do these waterfalls to kind of rising up higher on the sides, but not in the middle, it almost gives you this appearance of like, this is where they really want to get to. And we've got that yellow and gold koi on his left leg aiming directly for that. His focus is that lower spot in the waterfall ending. And then you have these higher points of the waterfall ending where you get this like flow of the water. I'm just picturing this, by all depictions, this waterfall is like a really intense waterfall. Like that's what makes it what it is. So I imagined it not having much direct reference for this, but I imagined it having these like very I didn't want it to be a flat line across his back, just compositionally. And I just imagine if a lot of water's coming, there's going to be some parts of the waterfall that are a little more recessed and some parts that are not. And I thought that would be fun to look at. As far as the dragon, and all the background, because we talked about composition earlier and like how I really like to play with the foreground background stuff. I think like to me, like it's a goal of mine to always to make like subject matter look like they belong in the space that they're in and to push and pull with your attention to the foreground, background, like make it interesting. And I think those are things that people notice as a tertiary thing. It's not the first or second thing you see, but when you get a little more time to look at the motif, then you start noticing all those little things, and that is like a little gem, like, the transparencies in the water. If you look to the left of his butt crack, you'll see, like, where the rocks kind of disappear behind part of the waterfall, but not the other. Because in my mind, these layers of water are closer to the rocks and further away from the rocks, and the further away ones don't show through very well, and there's layers of water behind it. So I like doing stuff like that. Same thing with, if we had a close up of the of that koi, you'd see that the yellow and gold koi on his left thigh is, the transparency of that water bar that's, like, shooting down over his head is also, like, a perfect representation of the tattoo of the color tattoo, but in grayscale. So we decided to not do color underneath the water as well, just to give it more separation and really, like, give it something fun to look at. So when somebody sees that thing, say he's out at a resort somewhere and he's laying on a chair and his tattoo is showing and the back of his thigh is showing, someone walking by would be like, "Holy shit, like, that's a cool effect." And it's not just about the wearability as him wearing this, like, scantily clad underwear is not really how this tattoo is gonna be represented in the wild. People are gonna see it in different stages. So I always try to make sure there's focal points where it matters, like making sure there's cool things happening if somebody's wearing a tank top. When I do women's back pieces, I try to make sure there's really nice, interesting, fun, even sometimes the main focal point in areas where like a scooped shirt is going to show a lot of that stuff. Because if you put a foo dog with the face on the middle of the back, for example, or a dragon with the face in the middle of the back, well, that's where tube tops go, and then women are going to not show that part, and then you just miss the opportunity to let them wear this entire you know type of clothing and just show off their work. So even with men's back pieces, like my considerations for like shorts are that like I want, especially when I do it as long as this one where it goes down to the back of the knees, he's gonna be wearing some shorts where it shows. And I want something really interesting down there. Like obviously we don't want to have a whole new subject or something to, but we want something that's like technically clean, precise, and just interesting to catch the eye. Because it might be the only thing. If he's walking around with a t-shirt and some like 6-inch shorts, like some jogger shorts or something, like people are gonna see, a 4 finger width of tattoo poking out the bottom. And that's gonna be a showstopper because if that's all they're seeing, they're like, what is under that? They just and that is something that's like interesting to me about this kind of work is just making sure that like all these nuances are very mindful and all these compositional nuances are very mindful. And not only are we using them to tell the story, but also we're using them to enhance the wearability of the tattoo.
Yeah. That's just awesome. And thank you for sharing the story because I'm sure not a lot of people know it, right? So the more people share it, the better. And yeah, I love the transparency. I always love that effect because it's just for many reasons the skill in the tattoo, but then it just looks cool, right? And then I also like how the koi are looking directionally, right? It's like
Yeah.
that's the intent behind the gaze.
Yeah, yeah. There's one on the left side that's like the furthest up, and it's a red and orange and gold with black spots. And that one is the closest, but he chose the wrong path.
Yeah.
And he went to the higher parts of the waterfall, and now he's looking towards the middle as if he's regretting his choice, because you can't go side by side on a waterfall. You gotta go up. So you've got the yellow one that's like he's got his eyes set on the right place to go, the easiest path to progress. And then you've got one on the right side who's a little bit further, but he's off to the side too. So he's kind of flipping. His body's flipping as if he's got to make some adjustments. And then the one on his left with that red and orange one, I just wanted him to have this look of like I'm fucked. You know, even though he's the furthest up, like, he's looking towards this break in the waterfall that's too far away for him to get over.
Yeah. That's awesome. I don't know if that was intentional. It was, right, from what you're saying, but it also, like, there's a deeper meaning into that, like, life when you
Yeah,
can get
absolutely.
really philosophical when you think about it. That's cool,
Yeah,
man.
definitely. I mean, whether you add that later or it's something that's considered ahead of time. I definitely had some considerations in terms of, like, the shape and the way that things would go and, like, how I wanted to fit him, and I had because I draw all this stuff on, like, everything except for the dragon, the koi. That's it. Everything else is drawn on. All the environmental stuff, all the maple leaves, all the water cascading, all that stuff. Everything in these tattoos also, all the gray work is sumi, so it's hand ground. And I think that plays a big part too in terms of like how it looks as it ages, as well as how smooth it becomes when you're applying it. Obviously, there's some technical application parts, but I find that when you're doing these the waterfall cascades and these waves and, you know, the light gray that's in the tattoo, even in the clouds, how I do it with that one that's coming over his belly is, you know, like, well, if you get those grays just right, they really become their own color. But the thing about gray is it's also showing skin. So that means light hits it differently. You know, light hits the skin differently when you have skin breaks and where you have tattoos. And if you ever caught yourself in the mirror in a dimly lit room where there's no like lights on, but you've got some say you look in the mirror and you're in your bedroom or something and you've got uh the windows, like the blinds are open, so you got some natural light coming in, but not a lot. And then look at yourself in the mirror with your tattoos. And anything that's packed with color is just black. Like you can barely make out the details from 2 feet away from the mirror. But the things that are skin breaks are reflecting light better. So I find that the lighter sumi, and that's why I make it such a focal point in my tattoos, that lighter sumi becomes one of the things in the tattoo that actually interacts with the light that hits it, and that's how we see it. So whether it be like having the proper size of the skin breaks of all the natural elements, the water, the wind spirals, the clouds, having the proper skin break on each one of those, not going too close to the next wind bar or whatever's there. But also having these like lightly these like very diluted sumi gray sections is something that I think really like enhances the quality of it in person, not just like on the phone or looking at it in pictures, but in person, that stuff really does something different. And it's similar to the how in like a really deep, well saturated, well healed black appears to the eye. You know, like black is just when it's done right, you're like, that's fucking good. Like, and I mean, it's hard to explain because like if you've seen some masterful tattoos in person, like you know where the bar is set. And you know that even black is not just black. There's some life to it. But when it comes to light, black is what's the word for it? The opposite of refractive. It's it absorbs. Black absorbs light and it holds it. So it gives you this depth, but then the light grays and the skin breaks actually give you the light. So it's like a yin and yang thing for me. Like we're using color because it looks good, but color is like the weakest part of a tattoo. The black is the strongest part of a tattoo. White is even weaker than color. So, you know, like when you get down to it, like structuring a tattoo, all of these things matter. Not just having, and this is what I meant earlier when I said that I try to find that fine line between impact and beauty, where some people just focus on impact and their work is stunning. But me personally, I wouldn't actually be happy knowing I could have done something cleaner, or knowing I could have been more deliberate with like things like these grays, the use of like, because to me, that's where I want my work to be, you know?
No, this is great. I think we got 2 more pictures. So let me see what's the next one. Here we go.
Mongaku. So this one is really cool. This is on my client Brandon. He's a very prolific and prominent artist here in Atlanta and outside of Atlanta. And he himself is such a good artist, so that the stakes and the standard I held myself to felt, even though it may have been the same it in the end and what I put into it for other people, but it felt that much more imperative because, like designing something for an artist is oftentimes the hardest thing to do. And especially when they're really good artists, that's something that was, it was very meaningful to me in the process of this. So, Brandon was getting tattooed by another tattooer here in Atlanta, and my name came up in the shop, and I don't know the context of that, but thank you. Because he went and looked me up and got a back piece by me. So his right sleeve is considerably older from when he was like a teenager, as you can tell, because it has that very matte look to it. There's been a lot of summers in between and a lot of good living. So that one looks a lot different than the rest. And then the one on the left is a collaboration. Well, really a 1-2 punch between two different artists. One artist did his foreground stuff, and then the artist that he was getting tattooed by prior to me, he um he did all the background stuff, and he did a phenomenal job doing that background. It looks great. But then he came to me and he's like, "Man, I just been looking for someone to do my back piece, and I don't even know what I'm looking for, but I know I'll know when I see it. And I found you, and I heard your name in this tattoo shop, and I went and looked you up, and then here's the crazy part. So I had a studio in a loft in downtown Atlanta, and the loft had like all these commercial spaces where you can work, and then they above it, like in other parts of the buildings, they had like residential. So turns out when I ran into him, it was in person, and he had saw my page, and he saw my face on my page, and he's like, "I see you all the time. You live here?" I'm like, "No, I got my studio right over here." He's like, "Get the fuck out of here." So, turns out he lived on the 2nd floor, like, next building over, and it just made the process of doing his bodysuit that much easier because he didn't have to commute anywhere. He could just put slides on and come downstairs. And there were times where, like, I mean, when you talk about ultimate commitment, Brandon really approached this thing, like, with a fever. Like, he was just totally committed, and he knew what he wanted. Not not like he didn't know everything he wanted it to be, but he knew he wanted a suit, and he knew what he wanted to look like. And then when he saw my work, he felt like he found the person that needs to do it. So just the happenstance of him hearing my name getting tattooed elsewhere was amazing to me. And I think that's definitely like some universal pull, like we were talking about earlier. And when he came to me, his idea was, I want a tattoo that represents my past with dealing with addictions and overcoming them and becoming a better person from it. So his idea was an image of himself underneath in front of a waterfall. And he wanted various things around. I can't really remember all of them. I think it was lotuses and like um maybe, praying mantis might have been one of them. And bonsai just around. So, you know, he told me that part first, and then his backstory second. And then his backstory brought me to Mangaku because I felt like so many of these elements that he already knew he wanted were part of Mangaku's story, and Mangaku could symbolically represent him in his repentance from his past sins and his past doings that had impacted his life negatively to in a way where he wanted to bring his life to a he was already on his path when he met me. It wasn't like in progress, but I guess it's always in progress, but he was already on that path. And he's like, I want something that symbolically represents me overcoming these things and becoming this new person. And what a perfect uh you know subject for him to wear, because for people who don't know, I'm sure there's a lot of people who probably don't know, this is one's not so out there, but Mongaku was a he was a samurai who was basically dishonored himself and attempted to murder um his boss essentially, and try to sleep with his wife, and ended up killing the woman he was sleeping with or trying to sleep with in the process. And he went off and left in like in disgrace, and went and found he became a monk, and then his penance was to go under this waterfall in the middle of, and it's important that this has fall maple leaves in it, because that whole depiction is relying upon the fact that you understand that this waterfall is frigid. It is ice water just coming down and torturing him. So he's paying for his misdeeds, and he wouldn't have survived, but Fudomiyu comes and offers him salvation and allows him to overcome this if he can withstand, with Fudo's help, the cold for like some amount of time. I don't know if it's 10 or 100 days. It was extreme. But just imagining 10 minutes in this water is hard. And to you see here, he's got ropes tied around not only his waist, but also underneath his garments. He completely, like, fully engulfed himself in this rope and then tied it to the rock so that he wouldn't wash away as he's in this waterfall with these huge, downpour of water that would have just tossed him aside otherwise. So I wanted him to, this is also based off wood blocks, and um, same as with one of the previous tattoos, I took liberties with designing it and picking different elements from different depictions, and I really wanted it to kind of not only represent him as the wearer, but to also have like little details that were unique to him. Like some of them don't have him with the bell on around the neck, and some of them have him waist deep in water where he's holding on to a rock. And we I really wanted impact. I really wanted, this is such a big statement for him, that I wanted Mongaku to be as impactful as possible and as big as possible on his back. So I really wanted to fill the back with water, and with this scene of just him just totally engulfed. And he's like in my imagination of this, he's leaning forward and taking the brunt of this part of the waterfall, and behind him is even more waterfall, just dense. And you've got these rocks up at the top that are kind of like, I use the rocks at the top to kind of connect his old tattoos and kind of sell it a little bit. And then next to the rock on the left, in some of the woodblock prints, people may not know, but Fudo is actually in the woodblock prints in the background, and so are his attendants. There's two youth attendants that are with Fudo. And instead of trying to do that, because I really wanted a lot of impact, I didn't want to actually put a physical representation of Fudo, but I wanted him to be part of it, because you can't tell this story without Fudo, because it wouldn't have happened. So I put the bungee for Fudo on the left, and it's engulfed in water, as if Fudo is behind the water watching him, earn his repentance and earn his new life that he wants to go on and lead. And he had already been a monk, but this is him trying to really get out of the hole in terms of his own misdoings.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like Mongaku because, like you said, not many people know about the story. So it's very nice when people actually do, and when they do it well, like you've done here, and it's a great story. And then I also wanted to call out, but you called it out, the bungee. So that's really obviously really smart, and not a lot of people notice that. Like I think you mentioned it, right? that sometimes they are references like say Fudomio, etc. It's just the
Yep.
Bunji is there. That character might not be there, but the Bunji or something else, the sword or whatever else is in the picture. So the presence is in there. That's just awesome. This is one of the more, all of your works are great, obviously. But if I think about memorable ones for me personally, this is one that's really memorable to me. I really like it a lot.
That's, and I appreciate that, and, the one of the really cool things about working with him was just that that fever that he just had to just get it done, and, I mean, I saw him almost every single time I saw him, he was still healing from the last one, and, I mean, I would have cancellations, I mean, we probably started out with a couple sessions a month, maybe 2, and then as my schedule opened up, I'll usually either offer them to people on my waiting list or offer them to people who are continuing on to new projects. And most of my clients keep a once a month kind of thing, or in some cases, if they're going a little faster, twice a month. But he came in and he goes, "Hey, if you got openings, I want them. I don't care what day it is. Just I'll confirm within the same day you offer it and we'll move forward." And he was probably doing about 7 or 8 sessions a month and living like I mean, 50 yards from where my studio was. It's crazy because he could just come downstairs and get to my studio, and then that's it. And he was getting tattooed. So if I had a cancellation or somebody that just no-showed me, which doesn't happen often, thankfully, but I would just reach out to him. "Hey, man, you home? You want to get some work?" And he would just come down. We do 3, 4 hours tattooing. Sat like a champ. Don't remember if there were any parts that he didn't get through with grace. I mean, maybe there were, but didn't stand out to me. And we did his whole back with the intention of the legs, like from the inception, like we always knew we were gonna do the legs. So I was able to approach the legs in a way that allowed me to really like get the composition just right. I wanted an extended amount of water to show for the same reason that we talked about with the Dragon's Gate back piece. For the same reason, I really wanted an extended amount of water underneath him because I wanted this subject to be up high on his back so that it's really prominent and like you can see this thing from 20 yards away and still be impacted by it. That's what that was my goal with this. And uh, um with that, doing a subject big like that, you still have to tell the story, and a big part of the story is the waterfall. So in my mind, if we weren't going to have him smaller and almost centered on the middle back and have the waterfall be this vertical, like barcode like vertical lines of water, if we weren't gonna do that, which people have done before, then we need to find another way for the waterfall to be a major part of it. And having this like bubbling, cascading water on the bottom was directly influenced by not by Horimono or Wabori, it was influenced by woodblocks. So we took that and to me that was all experimental because I had never done it before this way and I had no reference of any tattooer. Not to say no one did it, but I just didn't have any references of it when I approached it, and I really just I needed some rocks in there, but I didn't want them to be, like, even 50% of the motif. I really wanted this water to just, not dribbling down, but just bubbling with, like, energy, like, this water's coming down over him and then going into these rocks that he's sitting on and coming over it and continuing down a waterfall. And then we ended up doing his leg with koi on one side and a dragon you can see peeking out on the bottom right there. We did a green dragon on his whole leg, so that was really fun and, I mean, amazing, and he had some existing tattoos on his torso, and we worked around them to create like a mock, Munawari so that because he really wanted a suit look. So, we were able to give him a suit look even though he had a lot of tattoos all over already. And honestly, those tattoos fit in perfectly with what we came up with, so that's something I haven't shared, but it's something that I take a lot of pride in is, being able to make these things happen in a meaningful way for people and then having them be really worn well, because like, the Munawari or Donbori for the front, like I said with my previous client with the Busho, that's what you see the most. So, like, even though he has existing tattoos, he had two big geishas on like a summer motif geisha with with the umbrellas and fans on his torso, done like 20 years ago, and they fit perfectly within the Munawari window. So, it was really ideal, and then he had some lettering going down the middle of his torso, almost as if he left me just a little space to create these ISO bars as they go down and create the Munawari look. And, to me, it's not something I show off because of the fact that, like, it's a lot of his older tattoos, and it wasn't even our focal point in the whole bodysuit. Obviously, the new works were our focal point, but for me, it was a very important part because I know that he feels like he has a suit now, and he does. He does have a suit, but I know he wanted that traditional look, and with existing tattoos, you can't easily do that, but I think that we pulled it off, and it wears like a suit. It wears as if it was maybe not done by the same artist, but done in a way that was very meaningful to have that Munawari look and to have, and it almost looks like the lettering that he's had for 10 years or so down the middle of his torso was kind of designed to fit inside the Munawari as if the Munawari was already there. Down to like this small nuances in how I designed it. Like I didn't use deep black for any of his shading in those bars on the Munawari. I used dark hand ground sumi, but the difference is compared to like a really deep bottled predispersed black, you get a different look and it looks a little more soft. So he has these 20-year-old tattoos around it and it wears like it all belongs together. It doesn't have like these bars that are just on his torso are dominating. I did them so that they would be graceful in the presence of his other tattoos.
That's awesome. And well, obviously we can't see the front, but what we can appreciate is the back, how he gracefully combined it with the older sleeves. That's actually something also very hard to pull off. Like you can see, for example, in the shoulders area, basically, that you really seamlessly merged the work. So I wanted to call that out as well.
Thank you. I appreciate you noticing it.
Cool. All right, this is the last picture we're moving on to now.
Shojun. So yeah, Shojun, again, one of my favorite scenes. And me and this client, he is very passionate about getting this work done, and he showed up similar to the previous client with the mangaku, like just with that fever of just wanting to get it done and wanting to get it done fast. And man, he really brought it. Like, in fact, what you see here is actually a little different than what you see in real life now, because we went so fast that the light grays and the midtones didn't never had a time to settle. So this whole back piece got done in like, I don't know, 7 months. And, so a lot of that gray was done in the middle of that. So we only have 3 or 4 months. I typically think that the light gray sumi really settles in about a year, and it has a different look. And then maybe in 10 years, it even looks different than that, but it still has its like its perfectness, but this is still not fresh, but somewhat fresh, if that makes any sense. I think a couple cherry blossoms were fresh in this picture, but otherwise everything's healed but not settled. And I'll get some healed pictures. I'm actually starting his sleeve in about a week or two, so on the right arm, and we're gonna keep it going, man. And he's been great. And we got to yeah, so, I think the only thing we did after this was maybe some touch-ups on some, just some fallout he had, little spots here and there, but this thing has been done and sitting in the skin, and I love to see how it's actually settled in, and I'm gonna get some healed pictures in the next couple months and have them shared, 'cause I think it really does have a new life to it after it settles, and I think that's one thing you don't really hear a lot about in Japanese tattooing, and not every artist even has the same approach to doing gray, but, like, I saturate my gray as if it was black. And I think that's a really positive quality with the hand ground sumi. Of course, if you're using the right stuff, if you're grinding it the right way, if you are applying it the right way, I think you can achieve something that is like I mentioned earlier, it's almost like its own color. It's not just a diluted black, it becomes this real life force within a tattoo. And it really, in my opinion, is what makes the contrast of this. So all of the black iron gate that he's breaking through has deep, deep black in it. And some sumi for the lighter tones to give it a little depth, but then all of the background behind it, which you can't see a lot of here because it's like on his rib panel on the right and left, but the water cascading through in the background, it's like layers where you've got this cascading water coming down this water channel that he swam through. We did all of that in sumi, and just like how I mentioned in the last, about doing some dark sumi for the bars in my previous client's, Munawari, and how I did that to separate to really blend it with the old tattoos. With this one, I did that same thing in order to, kind of separate these hard iron gate bars with the background that is set back a bit. And I think as it ages, that's something that will be even more prominent and more obvious. And, it's I think it's a beautiful thing because it when you see it fresh, even medium mid-tone gray looks black. That's the thing that a lot of people don't realize when they start getting these tattoos, or just someone that's casually looking. They might think there's a lot more black in my work than there really is. And I'm not one that's like an 80-20 rule kind of guy, where I'm just like, where the gray is the finisher for a wind bar, but 80% of the wind bar is black. I'm not that artist. I really like to have a real airbrush kind of new, like a really smooth appearance to it. But I also like to play with tonality in a sense that like I use grays in place of black in certain circumstances in order to push and pull the focal point. And then that does a good job, even just against outlines, even before we got to having all of the color and all his tattoos and all, just having these things shaded, it already was pretty noticeable. And then as it heals and settles and ages, then those grays become even more separate and they have their own life force to them. So yeah, like a sumi gray shade, diluted sumi, not even like full strength, but still very, very dark. Applying it is gonna age in a different way than just the using like a bottle of black, whatever kind.
Yeah, I actually like, well, again, like I like the whole tattoo, but actually I like two things that are probably a little weird, but I like that you can actually tell it was a gate. Because
Mm,
actually a lot of people do this tattoo for the reasons that you mentioned, right? It's popular scene, it's a great scene, whatever. But sometimes you sort of like see the head there in the decoration and the structure, and then you see him, right? You see
yeah.
Choju, but you can't really tell what the hell's going on there, right? But here I
Yeah.
can actually tell, hey, there's actually a gate, which I like, and then I like the motion in the water because it's not. I like the dynamism in it, right? It sort of
Yeah.
like paints the scene. So I think I really like those two things and how you made them. Well, people are able to appreciate it, you know?
I'm glad that they communicate that to you because it was really a goal of mine when I was designing it and executing it. And one of the things that I did with like the gate part at the top of his back, where it's like this stonework, a lot of people separate this and they see this face, um, which I believe to be a foo dog, and it's not actually clear from most things I've read what it is, but I believe that to be a foo dog for like the protective aspects of it and being the stories in China. And, I think that's probably appropriate. I've heard people say it's an oni, but anyway, that's a little bit of a sidetrack. But this face in the stonework oftentimes looks like an oni or a foo dog hanging out with him. And, like, I don't like that. I don't when I look at that, it looks too separate. So I decided to make all of the stone accents have texture, little dot work mixed in, and I decided to keep the same tonality on the actual bricks that are on the sides. You can't see them too well here, but I did like a little texture thing where, a little, it's not common in Japanese traditional, and this may be a little bit of my influence from Horiyoshi too. Um Wanting to, like, do a little bit more than, like, maybe, like, flat traditional. and wanting to kind of like introduce some kind of textures and stones and make it look porous. So I did that throughout the whole thing. But then you get to the eyes and the teeth, and you got to ask yourself, like, well, are you going to do those stone too? Because they might look a little flat now. If all that was gray, it might look a little flat. So I reimagined it as if these things were made out of like maybe bronze or gold, and they were kind of like some stamped metal that was sculpted to like wrap around the actual stone carving. And I thought that would be really interesting to look at, and I also thought it would nicely separate the wood that's underneath the teeth from the stone, because I don't really love the look of brown next to gray. It's something that bothers me a little bit. Like, it's compositionally like weak. The brown is almost another gray, and it's just how I see the colors. It's desaturated. It's not very vibrant. It's not different enough to stand out. So I thought doing the teeth with this yellow would really like bring it forward, but not make it look like it's jumping out. I wanted it to still look like it's set back. And I think it worked. I really like how this came out, and I really enjoyed doing, one of the things I enjoyed about this one that was kind of weird and unexpected was, the ivy. Doing the ivy on the rocks was fun. Like, just putting these little, like, pops of life on top of this gray textured stone just really did it for me. Like, even before I even had the wood grain in there or anything, I was like, "Oh, this is working. We're on the right path," you know?
That's awesome. And you know what, the what you mentioned about the bronze and the karajishi, that actually makes sense. If you go to China, a lot of the karajishi structures that you see are actually bronze, right?
Yeah.
So that was actually a great choice as well. That's
Thank you.
awesome, man. No, this is great. Awesome. Well, this was the last picture. I'm gonna stop sharing and go back to the main man in here. We got a couple questions before we call it a day, but I think I got hints of it throughout our conversation. But what have been some of your bigger influences, whether it's people or I don't know, things that have affected your style and your career?
Yeah, well, I would definitely say that, we talked about some of that already with the ukiyo-e, and Horiyoshi 2. I would be amiss if I didn't mention Horiyoshi 3 a bit more, because, he's like our portal to in the West, he's like our portal to this thing, especially if you kind of, like, had your eyes on it before the internet became more of what it is now. The books that were put out prior, whether it's, Jill Bonnie's book or the ones that Taki put out, um, all of them really, I've got, you know, a number of ones from other countries, the Juan Puente book, and there's one, an Italian one I really like. Um, these books really helped me kind of understand a little bit more about the depth of Japanese tattooing. And I think Horiyoshi 3, in addition to Horihide Gifu, um, were like early inspirations for me because of the accessibility, especially. And also artistically. I don't want to take that, I don't want to leave that out and have people think that it wasn't the case, because it totally is. But, you know, between those 2 and then later coming across, like, more Japan-centered, inspirations, I would say Horihide Tokyo, getting his book, Horihide's World, was, man, that's powerful. Like, that's, to me, that's one of my favorite books. And, his body of work was just so incredible, like, and then just westward, looking at Ivan's work and getting his book really, like, opened my eyes to, um, the power and the movement, and I always loved the way he did backgrounds and how fun it looked like he was having. I don't wanna say this in past tense, but yeah, like, I'm only referring to in that book because that was my experience. But, Mauricio Teodoro, I hope I said his last name right, um, he was also a huge influence on, yeah, you might see some of my movement, like the way I kinda, like, when my backgrounds have a lot of force, I try to make them look like there's a rush of something coming for. I think that's from Mauricio, and of course, his dragons are incredible, and while I may not, like, go for the stylistic look of Mauricio's tattoos or Yvonne's tattoos, they're ingrained in me in some aspect of importance, as well as the people we mentioned before, Horiyoshi 3, Horiyoshi 2, Horihide, both Gifu and Tokyo. Also another big one in this order, because I learned about them in reverse order, was Miyazo or Horisune 3. I learned about him through Taki's book, The Perseverance. And that made me look at like fine tuning your gaku. Just it became something different for me. And I mean, the first tattoo I did after I was exposed to that book showed it. And it wasn't like I was copying anything, but my attempt to make these things that dialed in became that much more apparent. And then, a year or so, a year or two later, I got his master, the Horisune 2. I got his book later, and man, I understand. Like it helped me understand. I do wish there was a Miyazo Horisune 3 book out there, because it would be one of my favorites. But seeing Horisune 2 and his book was just it like unlocked some parts of looking at his students' work, being able to understand some things like the creativity and the approach. So those guys all played very pivotal things, but a lot of this is all books. So like in person, like I mentioned Joe before, he had a definitely a part in like me understanding background and me understanding subject matter and how things are supposed to go. So like it wasn't just books; it was like in person things and traveling. And I did a I went to a convention as a fan, not being invited to the San Diego Invitational that Bill Canales used to do. I went to the first year of it, and I think it was the first year. I think it was 2018, and, I met so many people and got tattooed by, Jojo Ackerman, who's great, and, but I met a ton of tattooers, and I saw some real heavyweights there just putting it down, and I just got to pick people's brains, and, like, those kind of things are really important. I think that, like, um, especially for, like, in this day and age where, like, artists are private, like, if you're private and you haven't had these experiences, boy, that's a hard hill to climb, trying to figure everything out through text and through books. And I appreciate that I've built friendships with people online and Instagram and so forth, and there's some phenomenal tattooers that have, given me guidance, like, Tatsu Toshi in Hawaii. And you don't have to be friends with him to be inspired by him and to be guided by him, because he's very public with it. Some of the stuff we talk about with clothing patterns was things that were made more aware to me by him, and maybe not even like directly. Like I'm not saying that he's like I'm picking his brain and he's just giving me secrets. It's not. It's just some people have that presence. Dave Regan in Colorado, those type of people. He wrote a book not too long ago about Western Horimono. I thought that was phenomenal, and I mean, I hate that it's sold out because I would like to recommend it to my clients, and it's not out there. So I really hope he does a reprint of that, because I think it was very well written and also very palatable to somebody who's not familiar. And even though I'm familiar with a lot of these things, I like to like read those things. Like I read Waboripedia. It's definitely it's at the very top of my recommendation list, which I didn't talk about earlier, but I have a recommendation list for reading on my website, and I have like a link to an Amazon store where people can just go to. It's not like I don't get paid for that shit. I want people to have it, and then whatever is on Amazon, grab it. Like just get it. Whatever's not on there, hunt it. And especially if you're a tattooer, you should have all this shit. Like my reading list is kind of like the entry level reading list, like there's some real deep dives I haven't included. But in addition to all these guys and people that have just influenced me along the way, sharing resources with people. I got a buddy from Alabama named Andrew Cuttrell, and he's a wealth of information, and we share books, and we bounce stuff off each other. So these are inspirations to me. These are people that have helped me to understand things at times and have given me Also, like, give me alley oops. Like, yo, I know you're looking for this book. Here it goes. Look, it's on this fucking website across the world. You need to go sign up for this special account to go get it, or something like that. And those are the kind of things you're just not going to stumble upon by following a reseller on Amazon, or a reseller on Instagram, rather. You know, those book accounts. You're not always going to find everything you need through those things. So having these kind of relationships to me is fundamental. And I mean, those are resources, but those are resources for inspiration. That's why I kind of brought it up, because like having those kind of friendships is and relationships with people, and following the right people, and like looking at what's being put out there in a responsible way, like Tatsutoshi does. Like I think those things, and Dave and everyone, but I think those things are important because like in this environment where there's a lot of fake news, there's a lot of fake information online, there's a lot of things you can't always trust. You need to find the people who are doing it right and that are sharing whatever they're willing to share, and then stop following the people who aren't, you know what I mean? Or stop, maybe like change your algorithm a little bit, and try to get in that. But to me, books are the number one, including those temple carving books that I told you about. I love those things. Spent more than I like to admit on those kind of books because they are not cheap. I would
Mhm.
never tell my clients to go look for them unless it's a gift, then, hey. But, I think that that's the kind of thing that's like, it's out there and it's really only priced that way because of tattooers. Like six, $700,000 books, like they're only priced that way because it's tattooers. But if you're making money off this and this is your livelihood, then you need that even more than that new machine or whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, that's a wealth of information. But actually, I wanted to call out because you just gave me the perfect segue into it. Your website. So your website actually is really cool because you have a tab or a section, whatever you want to call it, where you actually talk about bodysuits and how you might approach structuring your work and stuff like that. I think that's really, really cool because not everyone has that, right? I think it's very thoughtful of you to have that in your website. So I do recommend to everybody, even if you're not getting a tattoo by Proph, which you should, but you should still check out the website because it's
Yeah.
actually very, very useful.
I'm glad you caught that. For anyone that wants to see it, just go to getabodysuit.com or profbundy.com. I parked that Get a Bodysuit website just because it was easy to remember. But so for me, I like, I'm wanting to like really live in it, like the aspect of like in making people informed and making people understand. Like, and at the end of the day, someone can get something just because they like the way it looks. I'm okay with that. That's the American side of this. Getting a tattoo because it's badass. But I'm also there as a failsafe for the years after you get that thing, and then you don't understand how it impacted the stuff you really wanna get? So, I think that having that kill switch, that fail safe of just talking to people and being more immersive, and it's very valuable because whether they use it with me or whether they go move across the world and get work by someone else, like, I feel like that's part of my job. And maybe I'll feel different in the future. Like maybe I'll be like so far along in my career that I'll be like, "Hey, you're on your own, guys." But I feel like I've just in my career, as short as it's been, now, I think that that's been such a crucial thing for me because I've recognized the intensity in people that have learned and been inspired by my inspiration. So they found Irizumi, right? I always think of it like this, right? I always think of like Irizumi as like the entry level to Horimono. When people find Japanese tattooing, they find Irizumi first. They find a subreddit. They find a this and that, and it's Irizumi pages. It's this and that. When you get a little deeper, now you're into Horimono and Wabori, and then you start to understand some of the nuances, some of the things that matter a little bit more to the craft. And a lot of tattooers use the word Irizumi for marketing because it's very easy to get people to recognize what you do. But I've very intentionally chosen to not use that because it's too broad. And I think energetically, if I'm going to try to tap into that universal pull, that magnetism that exists in the universe that's led me to where I am now, that I really have to keep going with it. I have to really be living it myself. So I use Horimono for 5 or 6 years now, and that's oh shoot, I've been private for 4, 5 almost. So yeah, maybe 7 or 8 years now I've been using Horimono, and ever since my work has grown into Horimono. But before I really, really understood what I know now, and before I actually had that, I started using that term and I started making people aware of bodysuits and formats, and the payoff is completely, I think intentional, in terms of how the universe, like, cashes out on your investments and energy and investments and wording and positivity and being on path, and I think all those things really, like, come back to you, maybe not tenfold, but a couple fold, And, so including the literature on my website about formatting a bodysuit, I really just wanted to take somebody through before they ever get to me and we have an hour-long conversation, because it would be a 3-hour-long conversation if I had to explain all that stuff, and I was, at one time, talking to people multiple times for one sleeve, like, really just having, like, these multiple conversations. Because they would just leave the first conversation about the dragon or about the whatever they were getting, and then they have more questions. So I just grew into this thing that I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take the time. I'm gonna draw some guides that kind of talk about this. I'm gonna be very intentional about the words I use and making sure that the Japanese terms for them are represented, but not only that, I don't want it to be too confusing. So I want people to understand what that means. So I kind of break everything down, and if you're thinking about getting a bodysuit, that's a good place to start, because whether it's by me or somebody else, you're gonna understand that if you get a sleeve with a chest panel, and then you get another sleeve with a chest panel, getting a donbori is extremely limited, and you just end up with a choke point in the middle that's hard to surpass without it looking awkward. And it's almost so common in, like, older tattoos that these guys that look completely badass, but they've got this woven herringbone kind of thing happening. It's so common that if you don't know, you would think that that was like a fingerprint of Japanese tattooing would be like this, but it's really a symptom of not planning,
Really?
in my opinion, you know? So I try to steer people towards things that are gonna benefit them in the long run, and that means if you're getting a sleeve and you want the chest piece, think about the front. Would you want the Munawari? Because the Hike panel is going to transition down into that Munawari, and, down to the stomach and the ribs, and then connect to the leg, and this is just how it goes. So you don't wanna have something that keeps you from getting what you eventually want, or something that make it forces you into getting something that's less, um, ideal, you know? So that's my goal with that, and I have all different types of I have all the guides for like, if you're getting a back piece, this is the different formats. If you're getting sleeves, they cut off here. If you're getting you want your leg done, how does that impact you getting your back piece later? And I have guides that show the space. There's this space you're missing from a back piece if you do your leg first. There's a little space when you get sleeves, like this little, little sliver of space you lose from the back when you get sleeves. And then it changes the way you can compose the back piece and some other things like that. But just in terms of space, when you get your leg done, when you get all the way up to the butt, you just really, like, limited the motif that you can get for your back, because if you're getting a dragon or a snake or something that literally will wrap and kind of go there, you've just limited your options quite a bit. So I think it's not imperative that, like, every client has this, like, crazy in-depth understanding of these things. Like, they don't have to come in and be you, you know? Like, I think that that is something you should grow into, but here's the foundation. Here's what you should start with. Look into this and then move forward. And if they don't want to, I'm here for that too. Like I said, there's a kill switch kind of thing where I talk to people like, well, what would you do if you had this? And that kind of conversation. And I can usually suss out some of the stuff they might not have thought of, or they just don't care to do the in-depth dive. It's not forceful, it's something that is there for them, but they have to want it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I have one more question for you. It's been an awesome conversation so far, but we talked about your past. We talked about the present, what you're doing now. What do you have in store for the future?
I mean, for me, this is all I do. This is all I have. Horimono is full push. I don't have side gigs. I don't even paint much. It's like it's something that kind of dissolved. Like I used to paint a lot. I used to draw a lot. Now I sketch and I think of ideas for tattoos, and I spend time drawing that stuff, the stuff I'm about to work on. I'm taking on usually about 2 new projects a month, and that means 2 weeks. I get 2 weeks to I use the first week to think about it.
Yeah.
Just looking at references, just thinking, just looking at maybe a photo of the person's, back or whatever it is, and just kinda eyeballing, and then I use the second week to start drawing it. And, that's something that keeps me pretty busy. So I don't have, like, a side thing where I'm working on a podcast or I'm working on a this or that. I don't even have time for that stuff. I mean, I don't say that I'm not sour about that. I'm happy about that. If you can I think if in this world, if anyone is entirely consumed with the thing that makes them complete, they win. And if you can keep that going for your whole life and you can remain consumed, I think that's the only way, aside from health stuff, that's the only way you stay really, alive. Like you always hear about the older guy that retires and has a heart attack a couple years later. And it's because they had was that job, and then now they're sitting around trying to figure shit out. So for me, it's this path, and the only thing I could really mention is that I've got some t-shirts on the way, some small for my clients and non-clients. I'm doing an ode to my favorite brand, which is Ralph Lauren,
Mm.
and I've just been a polo guy since I was young, and it's been my brand of choice. So one of the things with polo is they have the bear, and the bear always wears a different outfit to kind of like seasonal. He might be dressed like Santa, or he might be wearing a ski outfit, or he might be whatever. He might be wearing some equestrian stuff, like that kind of thing. But for me, I was like, if I'm going to design my own bear, I don't want to put clothes on him. I want to be tattooed. So I put him in the fundoshi, and he's got some sandals, and he's rocking his Munawari Gobu suit with the half arm and leg endings. And to me, that was like I was like, how can I bring these two things together? Early in my career, I would always make stickers and make like little fun stuff to give clients. And I don't think they really got it half the time because it was just like I love Adidas, and I love old school top 10 Adidas. Very, like, niche thing, like, not many people are familiar with that shoe or even care, but, like, there's a logo on the tongue, and it's like a little blue square, and it has a basketball hoop, and it says top 10, and I made stickers that said tattoo and then my name at the top, and everyone's like, "Cool stickers," but they don't know what the fuck it is.
Mm.
So, like, over the years, I've done those over and over again where it's, like, some brand or something that I like, and I've always made it about me, and then included tattoo in the wording, but not including tattooing in the actual image per se. So, in this case, it was more close to home, but also, like, very appropriate for what I do. So I got to design the bear and draw it my own way and not, like, just steal one of the ones that exists from Ralph. And, I did that and designed all the tattoos, and I think it'll be cool. I think people will like it.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. Well, if we got, whatever you have, pictures or link or whatever information you can share, I'll share it in the video or share it in the post. So do share. So
Absolutely, I'll shoot you one when I have them printed.
awesome. Well, that's it. It's been an awesome conversation. I think it's gonna be extremely valuable to people to listen. Very educational. I feel it's a very insightful conversation. So Prof, thank you very much for investing the time and for sharing your knowledge.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoy your platform, and I think that what you're doing is from the position you're in as a client and as an enthusiast to come in and really do enough work to understand things to then have meaningful conversations. Even though I understand you have like a set of questions and you kind of let the artist lead, there's still a lot of very meaningful interaction. And when I listen to your interviews, I always come away with something really cool like that. And then especially the content that's not interviews is always very in depth. And I could tell you invest a lot of yourself into it and not just chat GPT copy paste, you know? That to me, I think that's what the game is missing or not missing anymore. But what's what the game needs is people that are passionate, people that are not afraid to actually do the work that passions require. There's a lot of people will say they're passionate and then it's half-assed, you know? So I think that what you're doing is great. I haven't got a real chance to use your AI platform yet, but I'm really interested in it. Like in theory, I'm just not an AI user, so it's a little bit of a barrier for me to cross, but I think it's really interesting. I think that could grow into something that is like just like how my you were saying my website is like that could be one of those things where it can help guide people towards making good decisions that eventually turn into tattoos and help not only the clients but the artists, you know. Hopefully the artists don't need it, but you know, but I think there's so much stuff out there that there's so much content and things to learn that like an AI model could probably be very helpful.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the kind of words, and yeah, I just felt, hey, let me just put my little grain of sand, little piece of value for the world and in this beautiful craft that is Wabori, and that's really it. So I'm really grateful that people such as yourself and many others, of course, appreciate the work. So thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for what you're doing.